You don't have a microphone open in Zoom.
Oh, thank you, Dan. That's correct. It's hiding underneath window number 13, I think. Second here while I get the video tuned in. There it is. Just a second here. Off the autofocus. That should be good. Okay, yes. Welcome everyone to the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group. And let's get into today's show. I'm Rick Crammond. And we have things that we talk about and show and discuss relating to Keshe plasma reactors primarily, but we also diverge into other topics. As people here well know, you never know what we could start getting into. So, speaking of getting into it, does anyone have anything that they would like to start today's show off with to as a presentation or a topic or something they'd like to bring up? A number of panelists, people in the live stream can ask a question or make a statement if they like. And we have a Mike from Ohio in the YouTube chat. Says, hey Rick, has anybody ever put GANs by guitar pickups? Just an idea I thought of. He says, I guess if people are like GANs, then they've been doing it for quite a long time. Well, in a way, we are, our own bodies are of GANs, and if you're close to a guitar, your body will resonate with the guitar. But of course, he means putting the actual GANs, the GANs material that's worked with the Keshe Foundation, by the guitar pickup. I believe Mario has experimented with that. Some GANs by the pickup or on the guitar strings, perhaps. And I have definitely experimented with similar things. Let me drag out a couple of examples here. Just a minute. Slightly different perspective on the idea, but instead of putting GANs on a guitar string, I put GANs in a ping pong ball and put the pickup, put some wires inside, nano-coated wires that went inside the ball and were attached to this audio pickup plug, which is glued onto the ball. And then I can just plug that in. And I've got an electronic GANs ball, you could say. So then what you can do is take the other end and plug it into the computer, and using software, you can actually use this as a detector with, say, GANs water in it of different types. And you can see if there's any difference between the fields and that kind of thing. It makes a pretty good detector. I did some experiments with it. We've showed it before on the Plasma Reactor Group, probably about oh, maybe close to 2 years ago now, I think. In fact, the little nano-coated wire that I had going from the pickup down inside is broken off, I see. So it may not be so sensitive right now. Also, I've got another similar idea where this is a nano-coated wire inside of a test tube with GANs. Actually, this is distilled water in there, but I also was testing with GANs water, and you can use salt water, which would be act as kind of a antenna. And the wire, the nano-coated wire, goes inside here. It's got its original plastic coating on the wire, but it nano coats all the way inside the wire, and then it's attached again to electrical plug in the top of the test tube. So now I've got an electric test tube. So instead of an electric guitar pickup, it's an electric test tube pickup, you could say, and electric ping pong ball. Actually, they're both attached together in this case. So it's just an example of a different way of creating a detector. I mean, all a pickup is a magnetic coil, similar to the wires at the end here, and it is sensitive to the vibration of the guitar string. As the metal guitar string vibrates across the coil, it gives off a signal that gets picked up. That's why they call it a pickup, I guess. Picked up by the coils and amplified, and you can actually get sound out of it, as we all know, by electric guitars. Been around for quite a long time, since probably the 1950s. If not before then. Probably Nikola Tesla was experimenting with electric guitars back in the old days. I wonder.
What I remember is the first boxes, let's put it this way, that modified the audio from guitars and what have you in the late 50s and first 60s. Were a box with two springs. It had some sort of an effect. I forget now if it was a reverb or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah. I think for reverb, they did have some springs in a box. I recall something about that. Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting to try it out with nano-coated wires.
Yes, well, it might have something there. I mean, every spring has its own natural vibration frequency. So perhaps there's a way of, with a certain natural frequency and the nano-coated springs, perhaps it would induce a pulse into the system, which is an interesting idea.
You're also playing around with the music, so you may have some more ideas to crop up with.
Well, definitely, if you have, for example, if you had two springs that were both vibrating at the same time, one was a little bit longer or a little bit thicker than the other one, then you'd have a beat frequency between them. And if one was going and one was going boo, then you'd have like a bubble, 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 kind of a warble or a
wow effect or something.
it would be a beat. You can experiment with it by whistling. When two people whistle together and the frequencies are close but not the same, you'll get a kind of thing that happens, where the beat frequency, which is the difference between the two frequencies. So if they're maybe 10 or 20 hertz difference between the two whistle frequencies, then you'll get a 10 or 20 hertz beat frequency that occurs, which is the difference between the two.
I remember university used to teach us that there was a special mathematical formula to calculate that. The sort of a third wave resonance or something like that.
Well, you can have harmonics and that kind of thing, but the beat frequency is pretty straightforward. And if there's two frequencies in that, you can just subtract the frequencies from each other and come up with a beat frequency. Usually it's not noticed so much unless it's in the audio range of something that we can hear a definite vibrato sort of effect. Anyway, okay. Anyone else have any input on GANs by guitar strings or something like that they might have done? Okay, got a question. Hi, Masha.
I have a GANs condition. It's something to do with Coca-Cola bottle. And let me adjust the light here because the background is lit up. The Coca-Cola bottle is not flying, but there is flight inside the Coca-Cola bottle. So I'll show you what I mean.
Sounds very mysterious, Mashfaq.
So here is the Coca-Cola bottle. Okay. Okay, you have to allow me to turn on my camera.
Let me turn on the magic button. You should be able to go ahead there now.
Let me grab a flashlight just in case there is not enough light.
No lighting in the dungeon today, huh?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's see.
Let
me
you.
Switch camera.
Got you so far.
It's not switching. Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Let me pin and spotlight your. There we go.
So if you look, this is deuterium GANs inside the Coca-Cola bottle, about 4,400 milliliters of it. Now, if you see, there is a separation that happened. So half of it lifted up. And can you explain this?
Half of it lifted up. What color is it? Is the bottle's colored, is it?
Yeah, so the GANs is black. So I poured the whole GANs in there. And then like about 18 hours later, I woke up and I see this bottle kind of squished up. I tried to extend the bottle, but then I noticed that there is a separation, and it has slowly increased actually. It was much less at the beginning. Let me see whether I can shine the light from.
It would be better if you put that clear white background behind the bottle.
Okay, now you can see the top and the bottom is not smooth. Actually, there is the top is kind of like it's extending below, and the bottom is also extending up. You can see it now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit different, but it is the deuterium here is unwashed. So it has the salt water, but very little of it. But anyway, so this I thought was a very interesting phenomena. Light inside the bottle, but the bottle didn't go up. But anyway.
So was this like shaken before it sat there? Was that part of the process?
Shaking, nothing.
Okay. Wow.
What have you at the top end, have you
What
got
have I? What?
at the top end? Have you air or liquid also?
I just closed the lid, and it has. I mean, it's the GANS is in salt water, but it has risen up, and you can see.
Where's the upper level of the water?
Yeah, the upper level is kind of like right here where my finger
Oh.
is right
Mhm.
now. So I don't know whether you can see it behind. You can see it a little bit, not too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I can see it there.
So anyway, so this
Yeah.
is very kind of a curious phenomena.
Yeah.
And anyway, I
You can
just wanted
see
to.
some of it falling down. Right now, there's quite a bit falling down, eh?
There is actually what is happening is the bottom is building up, and the
Yeah.
top is slowly going higher.
If you tap it, does it start falling down quite a bit? You just tap it gently. There's a big
Okay.
chunk there.
I'm tapping with my flashlight.
Yeah, there goes some
Yeah.
pieces. Yeah. Whoa.
So
So it's holding together at the surface. It's got some air bubbles or something that's holding it up there. And
no, it's not air bubble. I think it's salt water there.
okay, well that definitely will make a difference. That as we tend to float more in salt water, is because it's denser. It'll
But why half
tend to
of
make the GANs. Pardon me.
But why a part of it only?
Well, some of the you know how the GANs is, it takes a while to settle out, so it's actually at a very close to the same as the density of normal distilled water. So salt water is more dense, and it will tend to separate the GANs sometimes. And
But the situation was that initially it was all together, and the water was at the top.
mhm.
The same water was at the top,
Oh yeah.
and then it changed. So that's the curious part. So anyway, so I have.
Don't know what to say. Any other comments on that? Somebody?
That's what I'm calling it. So anyway,
Pardon me. You're calling it what?
flight inside my bottle.
Flight. Ah, yes.
So anyway, I'll disable this. Anyway. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Instead of flight by wire, for flight by bottle.
It's like
Yeah.
CO2 and zinc oxide. Mr. Keshe is saying it GANs it's separately. It's find balance. It's I know I have one time so my zinc oxide and CO2 separately. Uh, it's not about a bubble of air. It's always in gas, in settle down. When it settle down, it's a mix of gas, different proportion. It's find the equilibrium, balance these gas, and it's separately. It's needed to understand what's happened inside.
Okay, thank you, Dan. We have a question from Sarah, who is new here, I believe, and she says, I never made GANs before. Where should I start? Would someone like to attempt to explain where she should start? First of all, have you heard of GANs before, Sarah? Do you know what GANs is, and have you read a description, or do you know anything about it that way? If you want to speak, you could open your microphone, or if you would like to just comment in the chat, then we can work with that. So I could offer that GAN stands for gas in a nanostructured state, is one way to put it at least. Or GANs, or gas in a nano state is sometimes called. What that means is essentially it's a special material that's kind of in between a matter and a plasma. And it's created by the processes we use using the field interaction between different plates, such as a copper plate or a nano-coated copper plate or a zinc plate, and sometimes iron. She says, I'm going to school starting January and I want to study a field relating to this. I see. Well, it's a little bit tough because the fields that relate to this might be chemistry, biology, physics, metallurgy, probably several other fields as well, the health realm and creation of new materials, and eventually even lift, as in power supply for flying apparatus. But depending on how far you want to take it, probably not that far, especially since you're going to be busy going to school and whatnot. So to study a field relating to this, it depends, like if you're going to engineering school or something like that, you might find some fields are related. But on the other hand, the teachings of the Keshe Foundation about the plasma technology are different than the way it's presented in any of the normal sciences. So, for example, the word plasma in itself is defined differently in the Keshe teachings. Plasma could be part of the atoms that make up all the elements of our body. For example, if you look at them closely, they could be interpreted as a plasma. And if you look at the sun is a plasma. But if you look at our own body as well, there's a plasma of the inside of our body as well. And it's said that our body is made of GANs. And when we eat food, for example, it converts into GANs and converts into plasma, which is the energy system of the body. But if you were to take biology or study some other field relating to the energy systems of the body, you would be working with other definitions than the plasma. And they might talk about the blood plasma, but that's a different topic than what's referred to in the Keshe Foundation. So in creating the GANs, or where to start, there's tutorials that are available on YouTube primarily. And go to the KF Wiki is a good resource. So it's KF Wiki. And there they have the descriptions on how to create the various GANs. And if you look up on YouTube now, if you put the word Keshe in and say, I don't know, CO2 GANs or CH3 GANs or whatever particular topic, and any exact things that you need to know, you can put into Google now, and it'll usually come up with exactly what you need to look at in order to get more understanding. Okay, she says, I actually want to help design and build the ships. Go figure. I had an experience that taught me about ether. I was told by an ET being that it could be used to power all of our technology. When I came across this, I thought this must be the closest thing that humanity has gotten to that hovercraft type technology, hovering technology. I would say yes. This is about as close as it gets, at least in the mainstream of what we would find, other than some sort of black operation in a secluded somewhere in a mountain somewhere that we have not heard about, generally speaking. Well, this is interesting. You had an experience that taught you about ether. Well, ether is other than the ether they use to knock people out to have an operation and so on for anesthesia. Ether has been referred to for, well, virtually hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, as a substance or a field that exists and permeates everything, exists everywhere and permeates everything. And that with certain equipment or certain techniques, it's possible to warp that ether and to essentially work with it or bend it a bit. So, for example, that was the technology behind Tesla's flying machine concept. We're using, considering the idea of pulling in the tubes of force using high frequency, high voltage DC and AC fields. And the interaction of these fields was able to alter the ether environment and create a bubble so that the gravity didn't affect the craft. So Sarah, tell us something more about what you found out, or what were you taught, and what can you teach us, perhaps? What can you reveal about this technology? She says, sorry, I can't talk right now. My boyfriend is asleep next to me. Okay, well, understandable. But we have an open invitation here anytime that you wish to discuss this. That would be fine with us, and that's the kind of thing we like to get into here. So it's funny, I sort of thought that would be the last part of the GANS technology you'd like to get into, but it seems to be the first thing instead, so that's great. Thank you very much. Never made GANs before, but I'm ready to make a spaceship. This is inspirational because it may be, that's what it takes. It's just the wish to do it may be enough at this point in our history of technology and humans, that with the intention and a little bit of hard work, maybe a bit of luck as well, then we have the opportunity now to actually experiment with this technology. So this is, we're lucky to live at this point in the history of humankind. And perhaps these communications that people seem to have with other civilizations will help us in the transition to this new technology, both in first of all, accepting it, to be able to accept that this is something that could actually happen. And number two, to get the actual data, to get information passed along that will help us to build our devices or go to space with our soul or whatever it takes to for everyone's particular personal situation to elevate ourselves and get into the next phase of peace on this planet and prosperity and enough for everyone without having to dive into greed because we feel we are lacking somehow. She says, I'll say part of the statement here. Well, I was told exactly what you said. She says, I never heard of it before. Then it was spelt out in my mind, and I was told that it was pure light, pure love, and that it was in essence God, and that we just need to create the technology that could harness it, so to speak. It's everywhere, and everything is made of it. Very nicely put, Sarah. I think you got the message, loud and clear. And perhaps you can help deliver that message now that you were so graced to be able to accept it. Especially when it's fresh in your mind, it's a great time to be able to pass it on to others. And we're lucky now because many years ago, when you run into information like that, people might just say you're crazy or put you in the nut house or whatever house they would have handy to house people like that. But nowadays, it's pretty much considered normal to be, well, it's completely normal to be talking to yourself and walking down the sidewalk. People do that. They're usually talking into their telephones, of course. But in the old days, if someone was walking down the sidewalk and talking and there's no one beside them, you would think they had some problems. But nowadays we think nothing of it, and everybody's a little bit crazy, I think, and a lot of us are pretty far out there. But it's acceptable, and I think it's not only acceptable, it's becoming the way of the future. People are becoming more and more closer to the higher realms, you might say, perhaps more telepathic, for example. People might have like flashes of, geez, I knew that was going to happen, or I knew he was going to say that, or I've been here before and I've gone through this whole scenario. It seems so familiar. Or things like that, where you can just grok something rather than going through a mental process and thinking it all over and coming up with a conclusion. You can just see instantly certain things and have an evaluation of it directly rather than through the limited senses and whatnot. So things are changing, people are changing, the environment is changing, and I think the planet is growing up, and so are the humans on it, and as are the other beings as well. I think the animals are evolving, plants are evolving, everything's evolving, because says, when the tide rises, all ships rise with the tide, or there's some saying like that. Mark says, the matter state is the illusion. The fields are the reality. Wise words, Mark. Thank you for Mark's remarkable remarkings. Okay, what else do we have, ladies and gentlemen? What do we got for presentations? Anybody have something they'd like to bring up?
Speaking of fields, I have some data. I am getting some quantitative stuff now that I have some reactor that I can use. One of the things that Mr. Keshe mentioned is the gravitational is 4 times stronger than the magnetical. So given the same power to the magnetical and the gravitational separately, what is noticeable is that the magnetical, I can sense, there is, a distinct point along a distance where you can sense the magnetical or the gravitational much stronger. So let's say my setup is such that the gravitational is at 8 meters away from the reactor. Now, when I move away from the reactor, the gravitational field can be sensed at 2 meter, 4 meter, and 8 meter. But I can only sense the rise of the gravitational, that's sort of a peak, at 8 meter. So it's as if like there are certain division by 2 of the gravitational when I sense the magnetical. I'm not quite sure. I have some idea actually why this is happening, but I want to hear other people's feedback, because this will be very useful in construction of further devices that I have some plans on. But it is very distinct. I have tried different settings, and it's a spherical field, of course, but no matter which direction I go, I can sense it that way. So anyway, I'm just bringing it up to get some feedback, because we all have our wonderful ways of thinking. And I'm starting to get into more quantitative stuff, so that, beyond qualitative measurement. And then as I change things, I can feed further data. But this is a very preliminary data in terms of various adjustments I have tried. And it's very distinct and tangible, and it's just not me. Other people can sense it. Pretty much everybody, if they're a little observant, everybody can sense it. It's very distinct and noticeable.
So you're talking about like sort of a Coulomb barrier that occurs, like, for example, I had a plasma ball going on, then there might be a layer around it that has a certain vibe, let's say, and then further out there'll be another layer that's got that same sort of intensity, but in between it'll be weak, let's say. So it'll be strong here. It could be weaker in there, and then a strong layer, then a weaker, and then getting stronger, strong layer, and then weaker again, and then another strong one out here, sort of an onion skin effect. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. And there is a ratio. It's like 2, 4, 6, 8.
Well, I've definitely found that when I was experimenting with my little crystal radio setup and had it plugged into the computer and listening to it. The plasma ball, as an example, is a very strong field for radio. It basically sort of blots out radio and interferes with it static-wise, because it's a broad spectrum sparking kind of high voltage field. So it emanates over a fairly wide distance, and it'll interfere with radio. You can definitely hear it. Like I can hear this about 2 meters away. Definitely there's a a Coulomb barrier. Well, this enters into it where it's quiet, and then all of a sudden, it'll start to make noise, right? Then there's another one about maybe a meter or a little more than a meter away. There's a definite, like, it enters into a zone, and it's, like you say, a circle all the way around. You can go under or over, not so much under, but more across, you know, the same level or anywhere around, like a giant sphere. And when you go into that Coulomb barrier, it's a definite, like, when the radio reacts, kind of like, and you can pull it back out, and you, anywhere around where that circle is, it's, but once it gets in, then it's like in a different zone. It's in a more quiet zone, and there's that noisy, just a very thin, it's about that thick of a Coulomb barrier around this when this thing goes through. Now, it's not a, well, I can talk about that in a minute, but then same thing, you go in, it's quiet, and all of a sudden, vroom, 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 and there's a definite barrier. And you would think that this thing is so alive with power and so on, this thing's so sensitive, you would think that when you get really close, it should be really loud. Or when you touch the antennas, it should be really loud, but it actually goes quieter when it's very close. And then there's one noisy place here, a little ways away. Then the other one I was talking about, and the other one I was talking about. There's three definite barriers that you can hear easily with this system. So I thought, geez, that's pretty interesting. It's like you could call it a standing wave, right? A standing wave sphere. Here, another sphere, and another sphere. Now, the interesting thing about it is it's not really an objective place as such, because, I mean, I can't see it now. I can feel something when I get up close and everything, but I can't really feel those fields. I'm not sensitive enough, or maybe they're of a different frequency than the radio. So I can't see them, hear them, or anything else without this tool of the radio. But the thing about it is the presence of my body influences where these barriers are. Now see, they're not there until we measure them, in a way, right? And because we have crude instruments to measure, including this, and including my hand attached to it, and just the presence of my body, I've experimented with it because I can hold this out either on a rod or even with my hand held out. And where that barrier is, that very, very exact barrier, it's only maybe less than an inch wide of where the noise is. But yet, if I stand up close to where that is, it could change where the barrier is by several centimeters, let's say, because my body absorbs the fields, and it might increase the barrier size because I become part of the fields, or it could decrease it depending, because I absorb the energy instead of it being radiated. And it's quite interesting to see that relationship and how it can accent or attenuate the fields that get laid out with this device. And I'm quite sure that in a plasma field, what we call some kind of activated plasma, a real serious plasma, it will have these multi-layered fields. I mean, Mr. Keshe has talked about that, having your spaceship, for example, generating these fields. It could be kilometers ahead of you, protective fields that will be, one field will go in one direction, one field in the other direction, and they'll have a shearing effect in a very small distance, be a very high gradient. So the interaction of these two fields and a neutral field in between, as kind of a three-layered skin effect, can be very protective. So it's like the idea that we have here of these multiple layers, and you can imagine having a really intense plasma source that can project out these layers to a certain defined distance and perhaps overlap two different types of layers so that they interact and they provide that protective skin. It kind of makes sense, and especially if the fields don't affect you if you're close to it, then this could be a really high energy plasma, and I could be very close to it in a spaceship and it may not affect me. But if I was outside the skin of the spaceship, there might be a very high intensity gradient there that you wouldn't want to be in, because that would be the part that rips everything apart and bounces off any materials or absorbs them into the field, so that the ship is protected at high speeds through space. So it makes total sense that, you know, if you were to have a high energy supply, that it may have its own shielding, but it may also have natural shielding periodic places that have a place where it's not only safe, but it's actually protected, because you have your higher energy fields protecting you, and something would have to get through that first one that's kilometers away, and then through the next one, maybe the skin of the actual spaceship, and then maybe there's another protective barrier inside as well. So you'd have these multiple levels that would keep out the radiation or particles or strange alien beings or whatever it is that you don't want knocking on your door and coming through. So it's an idea, it's an interesting idea. Of course, with using other reactors and so on, we can learn how to extend the fields, how to control the fields in certain directions and so on, and project them perhaps, and then create this safe space wherever it happens to be, that we're not affected, at least not adversely affected by these intense fields. But we do have to realize, if you look at the, what's it called, SAFIRE experiment, SAFIRE, SAFIRE, where they did experiments last summer and this summer, I think, with a big vacuum chamber and a plasma inside the vacuum chamber, very much about this size of a ball that they had generating a plasma from it. And that's what they determined was about these gradient fields, these barriers. And they actually took temperature measurements, and they found out after they melted two of their what were they, the titanium, that's the strongest high temperature metal, is it, I think it's titanium. Anyway, their high temperature metal probe, much to their surprise, melted when it tried to measure the plasma temperature. And it surprised them because the temperature at the surface of their electrode was only 2,500 degrees Celsius, which was far below the melting temperature of the probe. But because of these gradient Coulomb barrier onion skin-like fields, it had a place where the temperature increased very high and then decreased again, then increased very high and then decreased again, and increased very high and decreased again. And at certain places, the temperature shot up to, I think it was over 30,000 degrees, which was way more than they expected in that experiment. How could they get such a high temperature with a relatively low temperature electrode? So this is the surprising parts of working with plasmas, I think. And once we get into the higher energy plasmas, suitable for space flight with a large craft, perhaps, we'll have to understand more about the fields and how they work, obviously, to make sure we don't burn our fingers or other body parts.
Rick, speaking of powerful plasma, so Mr. Keshe brought up, I think in the last Knowledge Seekers workshop, the issue of increasing plasma power. So I'm just wondering whether anybody has thought about how to increase plasma power or how to make, let's say, powerful battery.
A powerful battery. Well, you know, for example, this has got a little neon. Neon's an inert gas, one of the gases that is talked about in the Keshe reactor patent as one of the gases used in the reactor. And it's made for, you plug it onto a spark plug and you can tell if your spark plug's firing by this little neon light lighting up. You can see when this is close, like even this far away, you can see it's lit there. So it's a good, it's what, about half a meter or something. And it gets brighter as it comes in close. So there's definite fields that are emitted. And in a way, you could say that it's almost like free energy coming from that, but it actually does require some of the energy from the system broadcast into. But it's funny that we don't get the, it doesn't brighten up and go dim, and so on, like these different layers that I was discussing before. Although there's a definite Coulomb barrier right there where it's on there and it's off there, on there, off there. So it's within maybe ½ inch or an inch of travel where it actually makes a difference with the lighting. Yeah, so I was commenting about that today, in fact, with a friend that, I mean, I've been at this for quite a while in this group for 5 or 6 years now. We've come up with literally hundreds of different designs and ideas and things we've tried and pursued and not pursued and so on. And yet I don't have a battery, an everlasting battery that can even light an LED at this point. And it's kind of embarrassing because, you know, originally this group has started with the idea of free energy and to create, you know, a device to start creating electricity and this kind of thing. And that sort of got not lost along the way, but it's there's been many projects, many ideas. The Ganses working with different ideas with the health effects, the other things other than creating electricity and so on. And we have different things like the plasma batteries and plasma capacitors and that. And some of the plasma batteries have lit up LEDs, and we've got examples of the CO2 kit or other combinations of electrodes in the saltwater making GANs kit, lighting up LEDs and so on. But it's, we don't have a really solid sort of lifetime battery or something that's rechargeable that I've seen so far. They may be out there. but I'm not seeing that yet. Let me see, where did I know. Just give me a second here while I find a link for you.
Another thing to point out is that, you know, I have used coil-based battery as well as tube-based battery. And in case of the tube-based batteries, you don't get with a multimeter any signal. You can't see any voltage or voltage change at all. But in the coil-based one, you can see it. But in terms of plasma field getting generated, both are as effective. In fact, I think the tube is a little more powerful. But
Well, that's a good point. It may not always be manifest to this. We keep, you know, we were talking about manifesting electricity years ago with this group with so-called free energy and that. But it may be that that's not really the holy grail that we're after, this idea of electricity. The electron may not be the ultimate thing that it was been made out to be for all these years. So anyway, I put in the link there. This is a battery that's lasted 175 years. 175 years. It's been powering a bell going ding, 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 ding for 175 years straight. So I think that's something to think about. It's made of, what was it? It's interesting. It's they're not sure exactly what's made of because they are afraid of taking it apart, so it might stop working. It was installed in 1840.
actually, there has been excavation in, I know, in the Central Asia as well as Indian area, where they have found lights which were on, I mean, for a long, long time. But as you said, they tried to, some of the people that excavated these lights, they tried to see how they work. And as soon as they tried that, it didn't work anymore. It extinguished or stopped working. So, you know, the principle is unknown. So it's not electricity, definitely.
Well, what they're talking about in this particular one, this is what's called a pile battery. So you have a dry pile, which is it could be discs in this case, and they're alternating discs with the silver, zinc, and sulfur and other materials. And in this case, they were batteries with about 2,000 pairs of discs of a tin foil glued to paper impregnated with zinc sulfate and coated on the other side with manganese dioxide. So we have basically a couple of nanomaterials that are impregnated in paper, essentially, you know, ganses that would be, or oxides, you know, maybe our copper oxide might work, with tin foil. And because they put 2,000 of these together, now you can imagine it's pretty easy for us to get a voltage out of our nano-coated copper, for example. You know, you commonly get about 0.3 or 300 millivolts, for you know, as a, or at least in the tens of millivolts, depending on how we are testing. And you can imagine 2,000 of layers of this building up on each other, that it might have quite a jolt to it if we were to experiment with it that way. So anyway, they call this the world's most durable battery. And it has a clapper in the bell, like I was saying, that oscillates back and forth. Takes a nanoamp every time for the bell, which is a very low amount of current, but it apparently, they believe, recharges itself due to this, somehow the setup is such that it basically doesn't wear out. They said the clapper of the bell seems more likely to wear out than the electrochemical energy. So interesting. So I figure we should be able to come up with something at least equivalent to that from 175 years ago. And if you look at the first batteries they made for, that was actually, what do you call it, military secret at the time, when the first submarines were coming out, were made with electric motors, and they had batteries, and batteries were kind of a new invention at the time. They were always trying to come up with a better battery, of course. And the best battery they had for these top secret submarines was a black copper oxide and zinc plate and caustic was the battery. I don't think anyone's thought of doing that, but if you take your nano-coated plate and a zinc plate and you put it in caustic, you'll get a current and a voltage. And if you put a whole bunch of them together, it took quite a bit to put together in large plates. And I actually used like some kind of, I think like similar to our scrubby pads, or some sort of more porous thing with more surface area on it. And so what they would do, they would have all these batteries in the submarine. And to recharge it, they would take out the copper out of the battery and I guess wash it off, and they would heat it up to re-nano-coat it in order to put it back in the battery with the caustic and the zinc plate and to give electricity. So I thought that was kind of interesting, that battery design goes back a long way for that combination. But it was top secret at that time. Later became more common to the everyday person, and quite rapidly batteries got developed into the lead acid batteries, for example, which are much more common. Joseph mentions nickel iron with potassium hydroxide is also a good combination. Sarah says, what is KOH? K is potassium and the OH means hydroxide. So sodium hydroxide would be NaOH. And sodium hydroxide is referred to as lye sometimes. In the good old days, they used to make lye in order to make soap, and that would be sodium hydroxide. The potassium hydroxide is very similar in its effects. It's just potassium instead of sodium, and you would have to obtain that. I think they have it at pool supply places, perhaps, or other, perhaps a cleaning supply place. Not quite as common as the sodium hydroxide, which is used in drain cleaner and for certain kinds of cleaning. You can get lye in the Home Depot, I believe, at the chemical department there. What else can we tell Sarah about creating GANs, what it is and how to create it, and why would you want to? What does GANs mean to you? Anybody like to comment on that? Mom, we got to help out Sarah here.
Well, Rick, what does Mr. Keshe say in the opening comments and some of the videos that Flint has put together? We use, I can't think of the exact words, we use the matter state to reach the soul of the man, something along this lines, but he's using the matter state to reach us, to elevate us to the plasmatic state.
Right. So rather than the using that matter state as an end in itself for whatever personal purposes, let's say, we use the matter state to as a way to access it's kind of a leverage for accessing the soul, you could say. Otherwise, what do we have to work with if we don't have the matter state? Then we'd already be one of the, what do they call, plasma manipulator, the top of the food chain, master of the universe and the ultimate creator.
And of course, to study it, to understand it better, you can look at the health teachings, because your body is doing all these transmutations, conversions, transportation of energies in these different states there within the body. So if you just look at it, of course, is a copy of the universe. So if you understand that some of the health teachings, and I just put something in the chat for Sarah, and if she doesn't have access yet, she can, you know, go to the public teachings, the Knowledge Seekers Workshop, Carolyn's Workshop, and so on, and start there. But it is a very broad base, and it affects all areas, from agriculture to materials to space travel to understanding your soul and so on, health applications. So it's very vast, very wide, very deep, but all knowable.
Yeah, that's the thing. Many of these topics that, you know, like we talk about GANs, it's easy to say, well, you just take these plates and you put some salt water in and bingo, you've got GANs. And we could describe that very quickly, like in one sentence. Basically, you take a nano-coated copper plate and a zinc plate and put them together, join them together with a wire and some salt water, and you will start producing a white substance that we call CO2 GANs. And pretty basic, pretty simple. What an easy idea. So why did it take like 2 or 3 years for Mr. Keshe to develop out that simple idea and to actually show us how to do it and so on? Like back in the old days, he would even tell people how to make the GANs. That wasn't part of the equation. He had this special material that he came up with and showed it in the books, showed it in his tests, the various tests that were done on the material and so on. But we never really knew how it was made until years later when it was revealed, especially through the initial knowledge seekers that were in Sassano's and in Italy there to begin the teachings with Mr. Keshe. Armin was one of them. I think there's 10 to begin with. And they learned all the secrets of making GANs and working with the fields and so on.
And could you tell Sarah, Rick, how her whole body is GANs? Did you mention that to her? She wants to feel your arm.
I mentioned that the body is made of GANs, yes, and it's kind of an odd idea, but when you think about it, there's no elements inside our body. If we had the element copper sitting in our body, the body would reject it and kick it out. The same with iron or any element in its elemental form. The forms in the body are always implemented into the ganses of the body, into the into the plasma state, because we're working with ions and we're working with plasmas of the material, not the actual element itself. So matter level stuff in that sense is foreign to the body. It rejects, doesn't like to have metal screws and so on put in. Only very special metals will it not reject. You wouldn't put copper screws inside your body, probably. It wouldn't be a good idea. Or even regular steel ones would not work in that salt environment. They would corrode and whatnot. Have to be stainless steel or platinum or something. Titanium works. Yeah, so the body and the ganses in the body and the makeup of the skin, the layers of the skin and the interaction of the fields in between these three layers of the skin is an interesting topic. And yeah, essentially it's all a bunch of mushy stuff inside of this bag that we exist in, other than the bone structure, which is a little different than the skin and organs and so on. The bone helps keep us supported. Otherwise, we'd be like a bowl of jelly on the floor. A bowl of jelly gans.
Well, the bones are made, they're sort of a sponge also. And then you got the other strange thing you were mentioning, steel. If you have some pin made out of steel, if you got a bit of a pin that remains in your body, it'll slowly travel towards your heart.
Oh?
You've never heard of that?
Toward your heart?
Yes.
That seems pretty bizarre.
Yeah, but it's something that's been known for umpteen years.
Mm-hmm.
And the bones, they're a sponge structure, and the only coherent part of the bone, shall we say, would be the outer part, the skin of the bone. The rest is all sponge inside.
Right. I've got a short video I'll play here that I took recently in the local area, and it shows a seal. It shows a seal that happened to be very close to the shore, which is a kind of a rare event in the local area here. You usually see them offshore a bit, but not right in close to shore. And on a particular day, I was taking this picture, I was just happened to be contemplating about the makeup of our body and how the bones and how our bodies work, and all about the sort of the miracle of life and so on. And I happen to be looking off in the water, and what do I see is the following. I'll just play the video here. And if you look at this video with the idea that what we're seeing is basically a bag of gans, the same as we have a bag of gans. And this one happens to be extra mobile in the water. And I thought, wow, what an amazing display of dexterity of gans, essentially. And what a beautiful life that would be, in a way, if you like that kind of movement. So let me just play the video and you'll maybe understand or not, but we'll see. Say goodbye, my friend. Goodbye. Goodbye.
It's like the penguins. The penguins are
Yeah,
fantastic under the water.
actually, I think I have a more clear one here. That was just an excerpt that wasn't one of the better ones, actually. So let me play this through. It might be inspirational for someone. Oh, I see it's a bit longer, this one. Let me see. Okay, we'll play part of it here at least. Let me get that set up.
Whoa, look at that move. So fast, so agile. Whoa, look at that. Whew.
I think he wanted you to come in for a swim, Rick.
Oh, it's tempting.
Certainly in his element.
Yes, thank you. Nice work. Oh, it's great. Whoa, yeah. Good. Seems to want to force the fish into a corner.
When he touches that rock, it's like he's saying, come on in.
Yeah, he's actually feeding on some minnows there, of course, and he forces them onto that rock. He's got a special technique to make them come to the surface so he can gobble them up, I guess. But he's also aware of my presence at the same time. He kind of keeps looking over from time to time and just kind of saying hi. I'm mumbling a few things to him from time to time. Him or her, I'm not sure which.
And that's about a 600-pound animal?
Probably something like that. It looks kind of small in the picture, but it's actually very significant, yeah. And I'm just almost shocked at how quickly it can turn on a dime and just, like these very graceful, the whole body almost bends in on itself. And he just sort of gracefully leaps through and uses his fins and flippers to flop around and do a little fishing. It's lunchtime in the sea.
That's what Victor Schauberger used to watch to make all his contraptions. He studied all those movements and the way.
Yeah, he watched trout in the stream and the way they jumped up the waterfalls and this kind of thing.
Yeah. Do a few more tricks. What else do you do? Huh?
How a trout
Give me
can
a
jump
trick.
up the water. That's practically amazing. It's impossible.
Yeah, right. He had it figured out how it was done. Actually, the forces involved and so on is quite interesting.
One gull comes over to say hello.
Develop submarines.
Yeah.
A large gull.
Now let me see. He
Over the other
was
side.
taken into the end part here. You can see the area. It's a beautiful spot. And there's the little seagull that accompanies this seal everywhere he goes, it seems, looking for leftovers. And now the seal does an interesting little move here. I think I caught it on this video. Right at the end here. So I say my goodbyes, I think around here. Let's see if I can get focused here.
Say goodbye, my friend. Goodbye. Goodbye.
So right when I say goodbye, this is the move it makes. Watch this. I did this. I'll just show you that again. It's a very nice little.
Goodbye.
I say goodbye, and it swims in really closer than it has before. And he does this little. It's like showing the back flipper is kind of like waving goodbye. I figured that's. If you were a seal, you wouldn't wave with your front flippers because you'd be heading the other direction. You'd be going a little flip of the back flippers, and it's see you later. I'm out of here. So I thought that was kind of a nice ending. So anyway, that's my GANs video for that. That's what I had in mind for that whole time, was watching this amazing bag of GANs doing its ballet. Okay, well, that's a bit of a diversion, but you can sort of understand where I'm coming from, I think. Christian, is there time for a little GANs changes color question? Well, sure. Sure, Christian, what do you got in mind for the GANs changes color question? Let me get you promoted there, Christian. I'll promote the other people here now too.
Thank you. Hello. I have got my first zinc GANs production, and it's running since June. And now I discovered that a part of the original zinc GANs for the production, it became a little bit transparent and it changed color. It's like very slightly salmon, not white anymore. And it's only the upper part which is in the fiole. So maybe I can show it if you like, or maybe
yeah.
somebody can tell me about it, what it could be.
Yeah, for sure. Show it. That'd be great. Let's see if, can you share okay? You should be able to either start video or share as you wish.
Can you see it?
Yes, we see a picture of, looks like a tube with some GANs in it.
Yes, this is zinc GANs, and at the bottom of the fiole in there, there is still the whitish zinc GANs, and at the top layer, top part of it, you can see it. It's a little bit transparent, and it has got color. Can you see it?
Perfectly. It's a pinkish hue.
Yes.
What is the part in the top there, like in this area? Is that part of what you're talking about, or just in this bottom part you're talking about?
Just about the bottom part of the fiole, which is in. No, this one is not important. Let me try to comment it. Okay. This is what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
There is an upper and a lower part, and the other fiole, which has more GANs in it, it's just the same. The upmost part of it changed color and became transparent a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And there is just this white tube above. It's not important for this, I think, because the tubes are connected.
Someone have
I've
a
had the
comment?
same thing happen, Christian, but not a pinkish color, just a translucent white color with the zinc. And that actually happened in a pot that was 100% zinc. There were only zinc plates in there. I didn't know why the translucent material had manifested. It's a different, I say it's a different texture. It is, I mean, I don't know if it's GANs or not, but it's really strange. It's strange stuff. I don't have any reason why the GANs had a different state to it. It would be very nice for someone to put some information on it.
One could be zinc O, and the other one could be zinc O2.
It's also mixed of with CO2. Don't forget, it's not zinc pure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe with maybe
no.
with,
I think it's
maybe
a
with
pure
crystals.
it's a pure zinc production this time. It's a nano-coated zinc and normal zinc plate together. So it's not from a standard production of CO2.
Yes, but if you put LED, obtain one strain of proportion of CO2 and zinc oxide. If you make copper nano-coat like a connection, it's another thing. This thing is in salt water or it's wash.
Christian, did you
yes.
use an LED on between these zinc plates? You did.
I did not use an LED by then. Now I do. It's a pure zinc plate, nano-coated and not nano-coated.
Yes.
And in the beginning, it was all whitish, all white, like we know, like it always has been here, even if it's produced together with CO2. But over the time, over the month, it changed a little bit, this color. And
okay. What wires did you use to connect the plates?
By then, I've been using copper cable, nano-coated copper cable.
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, maybe there might be a very little bit of CO2 in it. But why does it show up now? And it did not in the beginning. I was thinking about maybe the zinc oxide GANs is being used up, or maybe it changes its state.
What kind of salt did you use for the salt water?
It's very pure Steinsalz, we call it, Louisenhalal. I don't know how to say. It's not cell 100%, but it's from very deep in the ground in northern Germany.
Ah, okay. Is it a white salt, or does it have a color to it, would you say?
You mean the salt? The salt is absolutely white, and I've been there where they produce it. It's a beautiful out place where they really have the saline, where they cook the water they pump up out of the ground. It's beautiful to see.
Right. I thought it had a bit of that Himalayan salt look to it. That's why I was asking.
No, Himalayan salt is very impure. It has a lot of elements in it.
Iron in it, and it makes it have that reddish sort of color.
Yes, I know.
No, it's not that. The translucent GANs is a result of not having an LED, because that was the same setup that I had. And I think the translucent GANs is because the flow is not restricted in terms of the connection between the wires, the wire between the plates. I've yet to go to a second production, hopefully this weekend. So I think if you'd done this again with pure plates and put an LED in there, this is just a guess, but I don't think you'd have the translucent GANs. I do think that's a result because the process of making the GANs is too quick.
Okay, you need to know something more. I still have of the zinc GaNs of this production, which is not in this zinc of zinc production. It's just in a bottle somewhere else. And there, this did not happen. It's only in here, in this production.
It interact between these
So,
different GaNs.
so what's different in this production?
It's only the ratio. It's 4 to 1 or 5 to 1, maybe.
the ratio of which?
Of the two fields with zinc GaNs in it.
The GaNs is just separating based on its different fields within
Yes.
itself. Yeah. And did the wire you use, was it plastic coated before you used it? Not that I think that has a factor, but Mr. Keshe did say the plastic coating does have some effect, even if you strip it off. But I received some CO2 GaNs from Arizona, not from the Keshe organization, but it came as a very light pink, just like this. It was labeled CO2 GaNs. And when I made CO2 GaNs, it was whitish. But I think Mr. Keshe said that it can be in a variety of colors and it depends on strengths and fields and intentions and so on, so many factors.
Sometimes it's a bit grayish, and usually the white is more the zinc oxide than the CO2 GaNs, which is usually creamier or slight grayness or pinkishness or sometimes a bit green, but that's usually when it's got too much copper in it.
Christian, what else was in within the environment when this CO2 was made? Was there anything that could interact with this production that could have produced
You know, I do it at
coloring,
home.
maybe, for CO2?
I do it at home, so there is other GaNs as well in my flat. So I cannot exclude 100% any kind of interaction. But as I have seen, the GaNs in the normal bottle still stays the same, and this one changes. I'm quite sure it has to do with this kind of production I have here. And these two phiols, they are connected with a tube, or I don't know how to call this one, from silicon or something. Yeah, it's silicon, and which is filled with water. And it has not been nano-coated, the plastic. But I've heard that it should or would nano-coat because of the GaNs, which is floating also through the tube.
You are considering if you distill this water salt, no, for making this salt pure, is transferred also filled in this salt. This is one point. 2 point.
Yes.
Second point. It's another element you have in vicinity, in closer for this. You have interact between these gas. For example, CO2 and zinc oxide, or zinc oxide or hydroxide oxide zinc. Zinc ZnO or ZnO2. You have interact. You have interact with salt in the water. You have interact with water. You have interact another bottle of GaNs. It's many variable for this. I have also I'm making GaNs of like hemoglobin. It's also starting from CO2. It's white, and day by day it's transforming red, or separation of these layers. Only now I understand how bigger is this piece of cake, when Mr. Keshe is saying.
Is it okay if I stop sharing?
Okay, sure. I can put my video back on.
thank you for telling me, for helping me. Yes, so in some way, this upper layer of the GANs changed. This is obvious to me, but it does not necessarily have to be depleted or something. It's just changed its quality, probably.
It might have made it more potent. It looks really potent. If you think about, for example, the blood, what is it, the blood serum, I think, is actually like transparent. Is that the way it goes? Someone could clue me in on that. But part of the blood is not, doesn't have that red color. It's clear, and it's a very important part.
Actually, we call it Blutplasma in German language.
Okay, so the plasma is clear then, right?
And also, you are thinking connection with amino acid.
Yeah, it could be.
Because
Oh, yes, that's right. I've put a very little drop of amino acid into both of the fiols there. I forgot to mention that. You're
what
right.
kind of amino acid? What
zinc of the same zinc productions. No different one.
And so you put some into that, what we're looking at in that picture.
Yes, but just a drop, and in the beginning when the protests, when it started, yes.
Is it possible that that upper area could grow from that? What, did it take quite a while to settle out over a number of days to create this double layer effect? Or was it quite soon?
No, it happened last month, and it was running since June, so it took a very long time.
Right. So it could be some sort of growth. Like it could be an amino acid. Maybe you have some sort of jellyfish are growing in there.
You have two amino acid, list 3 type of amino acid inside. This one, it's this little drop you put in. Second, it's this formate in top, like a boundary between area and liquid. And 3, it's amino acid formate from these two interactor field. You have already 3 layers of amino acid.
Yes, probably. Yes, I think so. I do not see that the substance became more over time. To me, it looks as if it transforms in some way more than becoming more or less, although I cannot prove it. You know, I didn't measure it exactly, so I didn't expect something like this.
Right. Of course, it'd be nice to have some kind of thorough tests done of what exactly that stuff is. If you're handy to a university and could use the equipment or something like that. Otherwise, it could be very expensive, I understand, to do some sort of thorough tests.
Thank you again.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it very much. We have a comment, I guess, from Jedi. He says, could the 80 meters field that a static GANs affect the GANs itself? So everything that changes within the circle will affect it in some way or another. I believe that it is not a problem of proximity, but of interaction of fields that are linked to each other within a radius of 40 meters per side. Linking fields. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you want to say anything more about that, Jedi, feel free to open your microphone and speak.
Hello. So I believe that this kind of white kind of salt we are using, in fact, it is a salt in which there is anti-agglomerant, I think it's called something like this. It's aluminum in any case. So there is something else inside the salt. And we should consider this kind of industrial salt as not pure, not 100% pure. So we should use salt from the sea, directly from the sea. And that is one of the things. Then the Himalayan salt that usually comes not from Himalaya, but from Pakistan and Bangladesh. This is a kind of salt in which they add iron to color it. And it shall be pink, of course, and GANs shall be pinkish, of course. And it's just a consequence of the iron that is within the salt. Then we could use other kinds of salt which comes from the mines, and there you have other substances in it, and they will change the color of the GANs itself. So it depends on the probably on the quality of the salt. That is the first thing that we can see. I mean, it's a consequence, a direct consequence. And then there is a secondary consequence of the fields within a range of 40 meters all around the alchemic transformation that we are creating. And these fields probably are used by the GANs in some way to produce itself. It's collecting energy from all around. And so what is functional to the GANs, because it is a kind of living organism, let's say, it shall feed it. And so we should find out within a range of 40 meters what's going on. Because sometimes, and it happened, that the container was totally depleted and there was nothing left. So I suppose that in that specific case, the GANs went somewhere else within this range of 40 meters all around it. And some other times you can see that the color will change. So we should test one of these colored GANs, like a black one or a blue one, at a distance of 20 meters and 40 meters within a field where there is nothing at all, nothing, just these two buckets, let's say, and find out if the GANs in the middle that is creating, it will become bluish or darker. And so we know that is in fact interfering. And so that is probably the secondary kind of influence we have on the colors themselves.
Well, definitely the environment and conditions make a difference. So it would have to be kind of tricky to do the experiment, because it might be different on your part of the planet compared to my part of the planet, and the different magnetic fields, different conditions of atmosphere and whatnot. But that would be good information to correlate.
And probably
how would you measure the fields would be one question. What would be a preferred method that could be standardized? The pendulum method has been mentioned, where you can get an actual measurement on a graph on the strength of the fields. What other methods would you?
There was an instrument. It was called a rotor gun, which could measure the organic field. Let's say it's called like this. But in any case, it's indicating the movement of the fields. And this particular instrument is not considering axis X and Y, but the Z angular circular axis. So it is working within the torsion field. So as this GANs is producing, in fact, waves of the third kind at the same time, So this is probably one of the instruments that could be used. And in fact, the pendulum is working within a torsion field. That's why it's spinning. So it is the same concept.
Some people have used that. What do you call it again? A
Rotor gun. It's called a rotor gun.
A disc thing, right, with markings on it that rotates.
Yeah, that rotates by itself, and so if you place it next to a biological entity, it shall give you the speed and so the energy of that field.
Some people have done experiments with that with the ganses. I don't know if they're here or can mention. Someone can mention about that, but I know that that has been done at least to a limited amount, and that would be a great one for the Plasma Scientific Journal if you could get half a dozen people doing independent experiments and getting correlated results that, you know, seem similar on at least some basic things of the different gases.
There are drawings, and so it's quite easy. I mean, it's we could build a few and see if results then just match. It's not, you just need, I mean, plain and normal things. Yes, you find in the kitchen, I mean, a needle and cardboard and tomato tin, and it's not very difficult. We can do it in 1.5 hours, 2 hours maximum at home.
The thing is, we have to have a standardized instrument, or we don't have to, but you would think ideally we'd all have the same exact instrument in order to measure with. Because if I make my funky little device and somebody else makes their funky little device, and one place the cardboard's moist and the other place the cardboard's dry, and one place the instrument says 1,000, another place it says 10,000, and can we correlate the results? Then it might be difficult.
Well, that is, of course, the problem we shall have to solve. But we have to start just by looking at if it is moving or not. That is the first thing we could do. So anyone could do it. And so you say the white GaNs CO2 is going 100, and with zinc is going 1,000, and so copper is going 500. And so we see if this is the behavior. We start in a very easy way, let's say.
We can see the relative speeds.
Yes. And then we
somebody else's relative speeds as well.
We could create a device of this kind, a drawing, a blueprint, and so we could do it at home, and everyone could use the same objects that we find everywhere. And so you just buy I said a tomato tin of the same kind, the same size, the same material, cardboard, same material, plastic, a needle, and paper. That's most of it. It will be 95% exactly with the same size, the same instrument. Mm-hmm. Of course, there is 5% of possibility that is in quite well different in some way or another, but it is not a problem. I mean, 5% we can accept it.
Or what if somebody came up with a GANS testing kit? Wouldn't that be nice, with maybe half a dozen different ways to measure the fields? Yeah. Measure your GANs with the device we just talked about, which could be in a kit put together very cheaply, and maybe a pendulum, and maybe what else could be used?
Okay, have you tried a Tesla meter on the GANs?
A magnetic meter, yes. I've got a 3 different ones in my iPhone, for example.
Yeah, okay. So you can use one from the iPhone and just test the fields. Now, if you rotate the field, and so you create a disk, and within the disk you place CO2, you shall see that is generating a kind of a curve, a field that it gives specific peaks. So every 2 seconds it shall give a quantity of energy. It's like flashing a ball, the bulb that Mr. Keshe show on 248, I think it was. And this kind of flashes, in fact, they match the magnetic peaks. So you just use your cell phone and find out that the curve, the peaks, are going, let's say its value, it could be 2, 4, 8, 9, then going back to 2, 4.5, 9, then going back to 1, and then starting again the sequence. Now, that is the easiest kind of curve you find. This is one of the patterns, and you see it all the time. So there is a scalar field working within a pattern, and so it's there most of the time. And when you find out that your spinning GANs then is creating a greater field, you shall see values of 200 microtesla. And when you slow it down and it is like a CO2, sp2, you shall see only an effect on about 50 microtesla. So even speed, of course, and the friction of the particles will generate a higher quantity of energy, and so that you can read and find out the kind of pattern, the field. There is a pattern, so it's repeating itself. It is not random. Because we can see that if you study it for, I mean, a couple of days, you shall find out that there is a sequence. So this sequence, by using a phone, I mean, you just use a phone and you try to read this spinning GANs, and you shall see the peaks. And these peaks are just climbing, doubling, and then going back to 1, and then doubling, and then going back to 1. So there are 3, 4 of them. Yes, that is one of them, the instruments you could use. It's very, very easy. But you have...
It's called the Tesla meter.
Yeah.
And it's got a little graph down here. So, for example, I got here, got a magnet. See, whoa.
Yes. Yeah. Dangerous. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it goes, see how the graph goes, whoops. The graph goes way off the scale there.
Yeah.
As it jumps up. Even, it's quite sensitive. You can see even this far away, really. Now, it's interesting. I bet if I move it very slowly.
Yes, and that is what happens when you spin GANs. So you have to place it in flat, and you just put the spinning GANs moving next to it at a certain distance, and then you see all the curve. And so we could compare the curves and find out that in fact there is this pattern. And the moment you find the rhythm, that is the kind of the resonance of the frequency of the frequencies, because there are different values. And if you capture that kind of energy field exactly the moment it reaches the maximum, then you shall have a great quantity of energy for free. It's just giving it, but you have to enter the resonance. So it has to match. It has to match the exact moments this kind of peaks take place. Be careful. It could.
Yeah, it's bad. It could affect the phone. Look how it doesn't affect the magnetic field.
Bizarre.
how you are able to isolate your intention, your strength of soul or field, or your field, interact with your measurements.
Well, if you are able to affect your magnetic field, so you just switch on this kind of app and find out if you are able to move the curves. If you can do this, this means that you are affecting the magnetic field in some way or another. So if it is rising or lowering down, you shall see it immediately.
Yes,
That is your intention.
I interfered with this. I stopping this eagle eyes, or how to say, of this rope. It's spinning, or
Yes.
coil hanging, or paper in the nail, like a compass. With my intention, I
Okay.
spinning.
Yes,
How to
that is.
interpret?
Well, in the case of this kind of study, you should not try to disturb the reading, let's say. But then you could use this to let's say to polarize the energy by entering the right rhythm. So with your intention, once you are within the rhythm, you could use this kind of frequency. Let's call it frequency. It's not even a sequence. It's not only scalar fields. It's much more than this, and we haven't got an idea of it. But you could just enter the kind of feeling that there is a rhythm and move this force by intention. You could try it.
I already tried. I can't influence, I don't know, not my gans. This measurement, not only in vicinity, in when it's enough only thinking or putting energy, no? Only or seeing, thinking, or connecting.
Yes.
It's already interact. It's not a measurement. I have a gas in one room. I stay in another room and I influence this gas, and this gas influence me.
Yes, because you are participating to the field is a collective field, and in so many ways it is linked. So this interaction is there. Now you are there is awareness of this.
You want to make this in experiment, Rick, putting one magnet or something closer to from your microphone for reading what it's like a microtest or this measurement. And I try to influence your data from your telephone. It's okay?
You want to put what up to the... So you want this, you want what up close to the microphone, my microphone. I'm close to my microphone now because it's in the camera.
No, I saying you have this measurement in your phone, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know how microtesla or is only angular measurement.
Pardon me?
Your application is angular. No, you measure, you make a measure of something field.
Yeah, this is a micro Tesla.
Okay, how micro Tesla is now? Really?
Okay, it's about 40, let's say.
Okay, put the telephone in the table. No, in the table if you. Okay.
Okay, I'll move the magnet away because it's influencing it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're at 42.8.
Okay, let me few seconds, okay? You want to up or down this value?
Down.
Maybe we can see it.
Okay, that's a good idea.
I put my intention and I want to making down this field, okay? I try. It's not necessary I do it. Okay? Just
Just a second. Let me get it set up here so we can actually read it. And for some reason, it's what? I can read the numbers in there, but it's not showing up. That's bizarre. It says 40. It has moving numbers in here, but it's. I can't believe that it's not. It's not showing up on the video at all.
no, shake it up a little
Copyright.
It's auto blur. What the heck? Even when, oh, you can almost see it there. For some reason, it's white outed. Okay.
Okay.
Well, here, let me try to go back to the other app. Maybe it's easier to see. Yeah, you can actually read them on there. And if
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
If I set this on there, you can almost read
now
it.
I try to influence this measurement, okay? What value you have?
Sec here, I'll get zeroed in a little closer. And you'll be able to see.
It's enough.
Here it's at 23.5 or so right now.
Okay. You want to put it down, no? A little down. Okay, I try.
We have some variation. Okay, it's 23.4, 23.3 more than 23.5.
It oscillate. Okay, and I try to up.
We have
it's
some 23.1.
It's not only my intention. It's also your thought, your soul. I connect you, your soul, and you making this is upping in, I don't know, 5 seconds. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and upping value. Okay, what's happening?
It's 432. There's a couple of ones. There's a 0 for the first time, 23.0. And well, actually, it is. It has gone down. It's now 23.2, 23.4, 23.3, 2.4. There was a 5 and a 6, but it's 1, 2, 0.
It's like experiment. It's how
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 1, 1, 0 again, 0. Hitting 0 every so often, which it wasn't doing before.
You're looking one axis, X, Y, or Z, zeta. One axle.
Okay, well, it's X, Y, Z on the bottom, right? Down here.
Okay.
So the blue is X, and the Y is the green, and the Z is on the bottom in red.
You're looking only one axis. You want to upping or downing the value?
Okay, well, it's up the value of the X.
Okay.
It's now at about between 1.8 and 2.0. Well, there was a 2.2, but Oops, there it goes, a 2.4, 2.3, 2.5. Now it has none that are in the teens, so it has just increased.
This is just experiment for seeing how interact your reading, your measurement. Okay, thank you, Rick.
Yeah, we'd have to repeat that probably hundreds of times again and record it in order to get good readings, perhaps. But it's interesting how our attention can actually alter the events that are taking place.
Because this year, in a meeting of Romanian team, it's playing with this, I like to say, this instrument, digital or analog instrument, and playing for spinning or increase or decrease the value, only looking or thinking or putting emotion, putting intention.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't Vernie say he's realizing that he can influence the car with his own reactors rather than the devices he's been making?
Yes, he said so, and that he doesn't even need any devices anymore in his car.
Well, isn't that the ultimate goal, is to go beyond the physicality, actually, and be able to, to do exactly that, to have actual functional control of the environment in a way of control of the physicality realm, actually able to influence it with one's thoughts and emotions. It's hard to believe.
And it was funny, Rick, that one time you were doing a workshop with Mr. Keshe there, the Knowledge Seekers Workshop, and there was some technical issues. And this is when I was just starting and all. And I heard Mr. Keshe say, just press any button, just any button. Meaning like your intentions were going to make it work.
Yeah, well, that's the way it works a lot of times, I think.
And that apparatus is reading sound.
Yes, this is just the sound frequency, so it's probably picking up a lot of the high end from the fan noise from my computer and some of the low end. And my voice will be in a certain realm. If I can go really low and influence this part, I go really high and put some more stuff up here, and so on. So depending on what's, I don't know if I can operate anything like that. Don't have any toys handy that are, oh, there's one. Does the battery work? Oh, yeah, there it is. Little rotating reactor here. And you can freeze it, take a picture, and that kind of thing. Set limits and find out the predominant frequency and where that range is, and so on. So if you have a rotating reactor, for example, you could actually find out where that red line here actually tells the frequency, and that was at about 1100, and that is probably the rotational speed of that right now too.
Rick, could you use the other program, the Tesla meter, with the reactor, the spinning reactor? So we could all see the peaks.
Okay, here's the Tesla meter. And then there's the other one that I was using too. See if I use this. See, I gotta see if this. Oh yeah, this not the best to use because it's influencing the experiment. Coffee cup. That's what we'll use without the coffee. Thank you. There, it's basically inert. I've always thought coffee was inert. It seems to be. Okay, so then when I turn on this is the magnet meter. So you should get some sort of magnetic result.
Try horizontally. Okay, hold it still there. Yeah, next to it. Let's find out if it starts pulsating.
See if I can change the time here. Yeah. Yeah. So let me rotate this and see if it made a difference. Okay, that would be where the
Well,
motor there.
you shouldn't move it. If you
Yeah,
move it all the time, there is no point because it's going to change. So you just leave it there.
Hard to hold it in one place. You can see little vibrations in the graph there. It's hard to see for you. It looks like a straight line, but it's actually a series of little jitters.
Yeah, it will take 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes, and then it's going to start this kind of sequence. It has to warm up in some way. I don't know why, but it's let's say there is the watery part that is concentrating in the center, and the ganses are on the outer part. And so they have to something like divide. They have to change position. Once they reach equilibrium, then it starts generating this kind of fields. But it will take 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes, before it starts giving the sequence. So we could, next time, maybe we try the same experiment and we just hold it there, switch it on, and then we wait.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying right now, but I'll turn it off. Yeah, that would be a good experiment. You could do that. I've taken magnetic field readings of rotating reactors, and I've also used this little gadget with the rotating with one of these type of reactors when it's rotating, and it's with its little CD drive motor. When this unit is brought close to it, you'll hear the rotation of this item. even when the motor's shut off, or even when the motor is not even used, you can spin these independently of the motor. And as soon as they start spinning, especially around the center rim part here, for some reason, it is especially high amplitude around the rim. And you can use this little radio to listen to each of the GANs spheres, and each GANs sounds a little bit different as to the effect. There's definite difference with the same volume inside, and GANs water, the plasma water, or with the GANSs, doesn't seem to matter too much. And the fields are given off, and it's a what would you call it? A certain frequency that's related to the RPM, so that when this rotates, it gives off a signal for each time it goes around. It's got a definite signal that's given off as a.
Well, the amplitude of the signal is related to the amount of energy you're giving to the spinning ball. So that is powerful, but the frequency itself, the range, the field it gives, it is a specific one for every different kind of guns. So you shall find
that's
it.
Right. Yeah, it's not just the RPM frequency that gets translated. It's there's each GANs has its own quality.
The RPM affects the power of the emission, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the frequency, the appearance of a scalar field, it is specific to the different kind of guns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What more do you have than the power peak, the combined power? This is what I was thinking about, that this kind of measurement, isn't it just one-dimensional? So you always get only one peak, like the combined frequency when you have a CD reading?
No, you get more readings at the same time.
In this unit, you mean with the unit like this, when you use it, or some other way, you mean? Do you mean there's like one peak given off from this?
Measurement general, if you use it with a Tesla meter or this Rot Orgon thing.
With the Tesla meter, yes, it'll tend to go with just the amplitude of the magnetic signal. It doesn't have the frequency in the built into the magnetic field detector. But this little baby here has a very broad range of ability to sense frequencies. For example, it's got a crystal radio circuit inside, and there's a little diode there. Little baby right there. It's got a clear glass cover and a tiny little chip of germanium oxide, germanium nanocrystal, basically, in there, and that's what does the magic. It allows a one-way flow and converts the high frequency radio into something that's audio that can be plugged in and listened to, and that's sort of works the magic. And that diode is so sensitive that, and this whole radio setup, that I was able to capture everything from low frequencies down to, like, regular 30 hertz, lowest we can listen to. I was able to talk into this box and have it record out the other end. Normally you can't do that with a crystal radio without a microphone attached to it. But somehow the resonances of the box and the magnetics and the whatever was able to actually hear voice communication. So this crystal radio hears any voice sounds, any audio sounds you can hear in the room. This unit is picking up on. Okay. Also, any light, especially when this box is opened, any light, like I did experiments with, hang on just a second here. Gather my piece of equipment. I've got a laser RPM meter here. And I stood at the other end of my house, you know, whatever, 10 meters away or something. And I played the light onto the diode. And it took me about, well, over an hour, maybe a couple of hours to set up the radio properly. I had to make adjustments to the software. I had this plugged into the computer through some particular sound software that could triple amplify the sound and convert the frequencies down to an audio frequency that we could relate to. And I was able to get this whoomp, whoomp, whoomp sound from the red light from the laser, basically an infrared range of, visible light range. And I could also have that diode influenced by regular light from the desktop. Sunlight, if you put sunlight on it, you won't get any sound from the sunlight, but if you make your fingers go across it and break the light and make it and break it and make it, that's what gives the sound. It goes zoom, 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 zoom. You hear that with the sunlight coming through and making a shadow on it. So it's the change of light or a change of magnetic field or a change of electric field that this diode is extremely sensitive to. And like I say, anything from audio range, virtually all radio frequencies, virtually all light frequencies. It's sensitive to the full visible light spectrum. I was able to put this radio up to my computer monitor and it could tell the colors on the screen. I could tell different colors by the vibration, by the sound that came out of the radio. And I could very distinctly tell the difference between black and white, and that was obvious, but distinctions between colors, blue, green, red, and so on, were all distinctive in their sound that the radio makes when I made a color on the screen and put this up next to it. I was amazed at the range of what this thing can detect. And that's why I was using it for experiments with both with the plasma ball, like I was kind of describing before, and with vacuum chamber experiments and other, with GANSs and different things, that can all be tested with this device. It's amazingly sensitive. It knows when a human body is close to it. It affects the sound. If you're when it's all tuned in, of course, if you touch the antennas, it will as well. You can tell when a storm is coming. You can hear the actual lightning coming through miles and miles away. You might not even be able to see it, but yet you can hear it. If I turn on the light switch at the other end of the house, the tiny little spark in the light switch, this unit will pick up, and I can hear it in my computer from the other end of the house, the spark of the light switch. So it's especially sensitive to sparks. Sparks are like the ultimate plasma to me, because we talk about frequency and so on, but a spark is totally broad frequency. It doesn't matter what part of the radio spectrum you're listening to. If there's a decent spark happening, it'll interfere. You can hear it, whether it's a sharp jab spark, like static electricity kind of spark, or whether it's a regular spark from brushes of a motor or something like that. It's all totally audible, especially in the AM range, but through a full range of radio. So, and I've said several times, I'll mention again, that was one of the favorite activities on Nikola Tesla was listening to lightning bolts with the storms that were coming, and he would tune his equipment to lightning, and he loved to listen to lightning bolts, and he thought each one was like a separate being. Each one had its own idiosyncrasies, and each one he named lightning bolts for Greek gods and various entities like that. Said each one had like a personality. So anyway, that's just, I highly recommend if you want to get into some
Yes, Rick,
interesting.
you can use this device with streaming the signal in the program you are using, which can generate a spectrogram from 20 hertz to 100,000. Just plug it in and let's see the signal. Then you have the reading, which is not only a graph, a linear graph, let's say, but you have X and Y axis. So you have
done that before. There's a program I've used that has several spectrogram type graphs on it. What are they called again? Let's see if I can find the app, because it might be useful for someone.
Better on the PC, because we cannot use phones. I mean, not so sophisticated, let's say. There are quite a few parameters that we have to change to reach to visualize the fields, and then to find out the frequencies, of course, and that will take at least a couple of hours, because you don't know where to look for this kind of field.
Yeah, when you get into that kind of work, it can be very time consuming because of all the ins and outs of what are you looking at and how you're trying to go about it and so on. I'm just going to open up this. This is called signal scope. So we have what's called the FFT analyzer, and that's a certain range of, we have the oscilloscope, which is pretty handy. We've got this spectrogram, which you mentioned.
That's it. But it's limited to 22,000. You need to,
let me see.
0 to 100,000. And to change the sampling frequency from 44 to 192.
We can,
No,
that's the highest. Highest, yeah.
Yeah. So we need another kind of program that is capable of reaching a higher frequencies, because we are looking for harmonics, and our instrument is working within the very low part of the spectrum. Let's say it's sensible to EMF and ELF and VLF. The ELF.
Yeah, the problem being that most microphones are only good to about 25,000 hertz or something like that.
You need to use that's kind of a radio you have, or a specific kind of antenna and receiver that could reach, let's say, gigahertz, or I don't know, well, going to harmonics that are quite high. Even if we can still see these effects within a field that goes from, let's say, the lower harmonics would be between 0 and 100,000, you could still see them. you would see a reflection of them. Yes, that is a spectrum. So if you
I
just,
don't know if I think that's just the audio
yeah, that is the idea.
that's going on right now. I think that's
Because
just
you are using the internal microphone. If you use line and you plug in the radio, and you switch on the spinning guns device, you shall probably see the lines, horizontal line, like a signal generated, continuous signal.
Yeah, I can't
And then vertical ones.
can't just plug in my devices.
No,
like
of
that.
course, it
I
takes
need a
time.
conversion and set it up and so on. But you get the idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, like you say, it's somewhat limited in terms of the higher frequencies.
I copied the link of the images that I took, and so the spectrograms are there.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. People can have a look there, or maybe I could show them.
Yeah, well, that is not the only effect we see. There is something really bizarre going on. I saw that this kind of disks, once you reach the frequency and they start giving magnetic flashes, and so you see that they are pulsating. They are interfering with other kinds of fields, bending photons. So I presume, I imagine that there is a direct effect on light, and if we don't want to consider the loss of currents of matter state, which could be another explanation, because we saw GANs balls flying in the air, and once Mr. Keshe, he spoke about a GANs ball that flew across a wooden door somewhere. So how is this possible? Okay, so the only way you could do this kind of trick is by losing matter state currents, rising it up to a different level, and then going back to the matter state. And so there is no visible sign on the door, and the ball just went through. So I tested this kind of, let's say, experiment, raising the speed of the spinning disks and taking pictures. And you have the pictures of this kind of effect in the link that I posted in the chat. What is normally a circular disk, it loses totally currents, and it becomes something that is, it loses circularity, let's say. It's not perfect anymore. I mean, it looks like a potato, or even it's something that is going on there that you have to see it. And this is probably the access to a higher dimension in which we are not rigid anymore. So we lose rigidity. We lose this the static vision and understanding of the world And so we enter fluidity. And once you reach this kind of, it's a gate, you understand it, then that is the way to exit this dimension and reach another level. Probably the plasmatic, it's the fourth, and so the three axes that we have been using all the time, because we did not consider, let's say, curvature, are still obliged in a structure. But the moment we consider curvature, and so it's, let's say, the fourth element entering the equation, everything starts spinning and losing the three dimensions that create our matter state. And so entering the fourth, we are able to, well, to fly probably. There is no gravitational field that is holding us anymore there. And there is no matter state limitation. So we could go through air, water, or even earth, just passing through it. That is this kind of experiment is just taking pictures at a specific frequency, and so matching the moment in which the fields change totally from the normal point of view we have of things to a fluid state. Let's call it liquidity. I don't know what we have to find a name for it, but even if it is plasmatic in some way, it is it changes continuously. So I'm still, of course, trying to understand this, and we have the same behavior in the galaxy. We have light that is just bending from absorbed by a black hole, or there are various configurations. But there is a loss of currents. I think it is photonic in a way, because we can see it, so optically. But we have to match the right angle. And probably the ganses within a disk are pushing outwards. Then there is a syntropy in the center. And then from the central axis towards the camera, towards the, towards the camera, let's say, vertically. So this flux is pushing upwards, and this is, in fact, interfering with electrons, photons, and probably much more. And so that is something that, I mean, don't think anyone has found out yet, but it's there. It's there. You can see it. Now, we could talk about artifacts. And there are quite a few artifacts we can generate with various frequencies and fields. But I have tested most of the possibilities, and it appears something that it's there. It's there. So we shall study it, of course. Try to take pictures of these spinning devices with guns in it, ganses, different kinds of ganses. The heavier they are, the stronger is the effect. So that is something we have to study.
Yes, right on. Thank you for that transmission, Jedi. Ursula appreciates it as well. She says, my heart is beating strongly. I love what I'm hearing.
What did he mean by artifacts?
Oh, well, okay. When you take a picture, a digital camera, for example, it will create artifacts. And these depend upon the codec you are using, first of all. If you are using a JPEG and it has a compression, it will create artifacts. Now, if you take a picture of the sun directly towards the sunlight, you will see that there are 6 lines coming out from the star. These lines are not there. They are artifacts. They are created by the texture, the pattern, the position of the pixels of the CMOS or the CCD, whatever, and the program itself. So you shall see things that appear but are not there. So these are called artifacts. There are more than 200 artifacts. So if you take notice of this kind of effects, you should be very careful, because if you are a photographer, you without knowing, you are adding something to your images that is not there. You are inventing it, you are creating it. So scientifically speaking, we have to take care that something that we see, in fact, by using a device that is calculating reality in a particular way, is there, and it is not something that we have added to the equation. So that's why I had to test many times this kind of, let's say, finding to see if my cameras were creating, or the way I was taking pictures was generating this kind of interference. But it is not there, so I suppose that it's something that is taking place because some other kind of field is entering the equation. So that is why I am saying we should study this phenomenon and find out.
Thank you.
So artifacts are something that is quite disturbing because we don't know about them. But if you just study it, you shall find out that they are there. So the sun is the first kind of example I can give, but plenty of them. The loss of coherence, let's say, is something important in a way that the moment we are inside a particular reactor that is placed around our starship, in some way or another, if we are able to reach this kind of frequency, then we shall move in space, or even air, water, earth, wherever we want, because we are in this kind of sphere that is vibrating at a different speed. So this is what we need to reach with 4 synchronized reactors at the same time to create a starship. Because if we are starting to lose currents from a matter point of view, then we are entering fields. So we could just go through the whatever, because we have reached a higher field. Probably plasmatic, it is within etheric, but it is within the 5th level. We are just bending and starting to understand curvature. So it will take time, of course.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Anybody have any input or question for Jedi or anything else they'd like to bring up? Alper says in the YouTube chat, our tools are open like lines of a telephone towards the side where the curious ones can reach. Thank you for your poetry once again, Alper. Okay, well, is there anything else anyone would like to discuss, or shall we wrap up today's show? We could go a bit longer if you want. Not sure what else to bring up.
This is Moshfek. I have a little bit of thing that we were discussing as you were talking about the various Coulomb barriers early on when I mentioned about my stuff. There is one thing that is quite interesting is that let's look at a real spaceship, which is our planet Earth. And if you look at the fields, so you have the inner cores and the surface, and then we have the atmosphere. So we have some distinct Coulomb barriers on our planet. Now, Mr. Keshe talks about the surface being the inertia and the inner core, not the Caroline core, but the inner core. So obviously there is a relationship between the gravitational and the magnetic fields here in the formation of various of these barriers. So anybody has any thoughts on this one? Because as I'm exploring this interaction of gravitational and magnetic field, this is interesting because you have the solid surface of the planet Earth, and then the gaseous side, which is interacting with the sun's fields. And then we have various layers on the outside.
I think we might need a whiteboard drawing for this because we have more than 2 items and my brain can't handle that. So we have to have something to look at. Do you want me to make one? Or would you want to, Moshfek?
Let me try to do it from my computer because it's not more difficult to do from the phone. Let's see whether I can do it.
All right. You have to do a little dance to get to your computer there.
I guess I can use my finger too. Let's see whether I can use my finger.
Yeah, it worked pretty good last time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the sharing here and wind down my analyzer controls.
You have some sort of planet or spaceship on that image you have. Or is it the moon?
We've got space, the final frontier here. Yeah, that's basically the moon.
Yeah. Well, that's a spaceship as well.
Yeah.
Like planet Earth.
And look at all the so-called stars and or planets in the background, which are in each one is its own plasmatic entity.
Can I create a whiteboard from the share?
Should be able to, yeah. Just do a new share and select whiteboard.
Yeah.
Maybe it's easier for me to right now.
No, I don't see a share. Okay,
No.
yes, I see whiteboard. Okay, I got it.
Okay, yep, you've got it.
Okay, all right. So let me draw the planet. Oops, I have to choose this pencil.
So we have the planet. Let's call it the planet surface, and then within that we have. Okay. Okay, what happened? Okay. We have another one core. I'll just draw one core. And then we have the atmosphere. Let's draw the atmosphere. So we have the atmosphere around it. Now, for each of these boundaries, whether the inner core or the surface, we have some sort of field interaction for which particular material, call it earth or water of the ocean, is forming at that particular position. The inner core is similarly different. We have the molten environment. The interesting part is this: these gravitational fields, once they're there, the two cores, they also interact with each other for the formation of what's in between the inner two boundaries, much like between two skins. So this is one situation where we have field interaction that creates certain boundaries, and then the boundaries interact as well. In case of the outer boundary, the green one, which is, let's say, the atmosphere, which interacts with the fields from the sun. And we have ionosphere and various carbon, oxygen, nitrogen forming as a part of our atmosphere. So my question is very basic, in the sense that how we can create a set. It should be a very small number of fields, be it gravitational or magnetical, of certain strength. It appears that it is possible to generate fields of certain strength. And if we can create a number of them and see their interactions, then much like rubbing of the sun's field with the planet Earth, we have the plasma lighting, which we call the blue sky. And in a way, a similar interaction is happening on the surface, which may not involve the sun's field, but only the fields emanating from the inside the planet. We have the solid surface or the ocean. So given that we have a set of fields and we can control their strengths, we should be able to devise an experiment. And Mr. Keshe already demonstrated with the ball that was lighting up, to create these conditions of manifestation, be it material or somewhere in the electromagnetic spectrum or radio spectrum, wherever, more in the spectrum that we can detect. And earlier you guys were talking about the various frequency aspect of it, which is all at the material level. So as we change these fields, which is the small set of gravitational and magnetic field boundaries, then the manifestation, be it in the light or radio spectrum, would help us calibrate the field interaction. So this is what I wanted to get at, the calibration. But before the calibration step can be initiated, we have to have these examples of light or material manifesting, and which has the prerequisite that we have to have very precise control over these fields.
Well, we have one example in your example here, which is there's what's called the, at least in northern Canada and some places, what's called the Northern Lights. And it's in the upper atmosphere, and you'll get maybe a series of colors that are shooting through the sky in particular formations, and it's called the Northern Lights, and they'll be dynamic. It'll be sort of like sheets of color coming down, like clouds kind of, but in more streaming kind of shapes. And that's due to the friction interaction of fields. So maybe there's something to be learned there. Yeah, it's called the Aurora Borealis. Thanks, Dan. Maybe there's something to be learned there in terms of how we can create light with our GANs arrangements. Because it's definitely a friction of the fields. I think it's got to do with the flow of the cosmic, not the cosmic rays, but the what is it? The solar rays, I think, as they interact with the upper atmosphere and strip off, ionize the gases there. So ionized gases are very easy to light up. That's part of what they do when they ionize and then they come back to the ground state, they give off light. So light is often given off by something that's been activated and gives off its energy and goes back to a lower energy state, and it gives off a pulse of light. It usually comes out as a quantum of some sort, photon, a bunch of photons or whatever, a certain range, what we call a
that
certain
reminds
color.
me of a very interesting phenomena, which I have never mentioned, is that I dried GANs and I created these layers of GANs using wax for the reactors that I mentioned. And as I was heating up the wax with a flame, and sometimes it would the flame would come in contact with one of the GANs particles, and it would light up like a spark. And that I have never seen. So that I wanted to mention it in this meeting, but I've never occurred to me. It's just as you were talking about it. So every time the flame hit the spot, one of the GANs, it didn't burn, but it just created a spark, and it lit up, and then went away. It was very fascinating. As I was doing this, layering my reactors, the dry GANs I used. So this is something, so there is an energetic reaction with the flame that was hitting the GANs material.
Yep, definitely. And if you were to look up, for example, zinc oxide is used in LEDs. It's got a large
Really?
band gap, and it's I'm just looking at there's a paper on it here. I can put the link in while I'm looking at it.
Oh, and another thing, different GANs have a different light emission, by the way. You are good at poking me, really, but this is another thing that as I was doing it, I noticed that too. Slightly different.
It says zinc oxide crystallizes in the Wurtzite structure, the same as gallium nitride, I think. But in contrast, large zinc oxide single crystals can be fabricated. Furthermore, zinc oxide is inexpensive, chemically stable, easy to prepare and etch, and non-toxic, which also makes the fabrication of zinc oxide-based optical devices an attractive prospect. So this paper, when was this? 2012. This paper is actually published in 2013. The link is in the chat there and in the live stream. If I can put it in YouTube, I would, but I don't know if I can right now. Yeah, there we go. And it just shows the potential of zinc oxide. If you look up zinc oxide in the scientific papers, there's actually a lot of scientific papers with it because it's so versatile and so useful. And actually, zinc oxide is also used as in lighting. It can, like it's phosphorescent, or it lights up under certain conditions. So that's something we should find out more about, actually.
Well, could I try to add something? I don't know if this is adding.
Sure, yeah.
I'm hoping it would. Now, in Alex's class earlier, he drew a white line around the blue circle, a white line around the purple circle, and I think a white line around there. And that's where the interaction of the free plasma takes place. These are fields in between here, but where the plasma is created is in those white lines. I don't know if this adds to what you're discussing or not, but it came to me, and thank you, Mosfeq and Rick.
Well, part of it is like what we're describing here is basically the visual aspects, I guess, or like what, where is the plasma and where is the matter level? So as far as, and then we haven't even really considered the magnetic field, which could be more like, let's see, maybe in, no, let's choose this color. Depending, say the sun was over here somewhere, then that's going to affect the magnetic field of the Earth, and it might look, let me see, how does it look like if the axis of the Earth was, say, through here, it had a tilt to it, and the fields would normally kind of curl around, but they end up going, they get pushed, and it ends up kind of like a spider-looking field, the way it curls around the back and so on, because of the force of the sun changing the shape of the magnetic field. There's pictures of, maybe I should, well, people have seen it, I'm sure, the different pictures of the Earth's magnetic field that they have nowadays. So that's another interaction. In fact, they found there's several magnetic fields of the Earth, not just one, because of the interaction of the ionosphere, which is, or upper atmosphere. Part of it is magnetic and has a lot of hydrogens in it and so on. And it creates its own magnetic fields, and it interacts with the Earth's magnetic fields, and the sun gets involved. And they have these enormous magnetic current sheets that are going on, and the snapping and crackling of magnetic connections, all this dynamic action going on just outside the Earth's atmosphere that they had basically no idea that it was so active before. But they sent up these little satellites in the last few years to collect data, and multiple configurations of satellites. So they have 4 satellites in a configuration. In fact, I believe it was a tetrahedral configuration at a certain distance from each other they keep, and they can notate the magnetic fields and what direction they're coming from and what particles are involved and all this kind of thing, all the sciencey things. And they come up with these really quite elegant, beautiful things that are going on with magnetic fields that we weren't aware of before. And this changes their knowledge of all of astronomy, essentially. Now, so what I was going to mention is the magnetic fields are generally not visible except when they interact, like we see in the aurora borealis, and we can see some sort of visible resultant. We see these, beautiful lights. The same as a rainbow would be. It shows the visible aspects of sunlight that we wouldn't normally see as sunlight passes through the atmosphere pretty well in the visible range. It doesn't lose much of its energy compared to ultraviolet, which loses, I think, 2/3 or more of its energy passing through the atmosphere. So normally the visible light passes through, and then it has to hit something before we see it, and we see it. Oh, it's a white, cloth, or it's gray pavement. Oh, it's a red hat or whatever. It's the light hitting and absorbing, and what gets reflected is what we see in our eyeballs and interpret as a certain color and so on. But it's actually all colors. It's the clear light coming from the sun is all colors put together. So we see that in a very specific circumstance of a rainbow, when things are converted and twisted in a prismatic kind of way, and they get the light gets converted down into the visible spectrum that we can easily see. And that's similar to the northern lights or any interaction with fields. It's like Mr. Keshe says, it's a scraping of the fields, a friction that takes place between that interaction. And we can see that with the Coulomb barriers of, even the Earth's crust. It's very, if you ever fall down and fall off your bicycle and skid along the ground, you'll find that it is definitely friction involved. And when our skin rubs against the skin of the Earth, then there's heck to pay. There's usually pain involved. Well, not always. No, sometimes it's a pleasant experience. Might be with running your fingers through sand, for example, as opposed to taking a face dive in that same sand because you were crazy enough to go skateboarding down a sand dune or something. Which I've just seen a video like that. So the interaction with these interfaces is dependent. In the case of the sand, it's dependent. Sometimes it's beautiful to lie down in some warm sand. Other times it'll burn your foot and you'll be jumping around like a jackrabbit trying to keep your feet cool. Or you might hit the sand at the wrong speed and the wrong angle, and that interface between those two skin barriers is what you call impacted, or we end up with a scrape. It actually, the scraping action interferes with our outer skin and goes into our inner skin, and we react with sometimes leaking of our internal fluids, or definitely a bit of leaking through our mouth of some words, or pain, feeling pain of some sort. So the idea is that there's different interactions with these skins, and we have the rays of the sun coming through. We also have field interactions. We also have cosmic rays. We've got from every star of the universe is coming through. We've also got matter level things, meteorites and small bits and pieces, and other debris and whatnot, all interacting in various different levels. Not to mention the ionosphere, which is the area in between here, between our outer atmosphere, the very outer, and the Earth. And this is what's talked about as the Schumann resonance. It's actually the resonance of the ionosphere, not the Earth itself. They call it the Schumann Earth resonance, but it's the ionosphere. And this is what Nikola Tesla detected back around 1900 or so. He, in fact, before that, in the late 1880s, I believe, he already had figured out the vibration rate, the 7, I think it's 7.83 hertz Schumann frequency. It's called the Schumann frequency, but Tesla actually discovered it, and no one paid attention to it until about 60 years later, in the 50s or late 40s or 50s, when Schumann rediscovered this frequency that is the resonant frequency of this ionosphere. And it's important because a lot of the things on the planet are based on that resonance and tend to organize themselves after that, including the human brain, because it turns out that that's right in the sweet spot of the theta brainwave frequency, which is the deep subconscious, the area that the psychics and shamans and others that get into astral travel and deep meditative states and that kind of thing is from the information comes from the theta brainwave frequency. And if we can tune into that, it's the same as the Earth frequency, but it's hard to do. There's many distractions that take us up into the alpha and beta, especially the busy beta brain frequencies and up above the 10 hertz frequency, which interferes with the ability of the frequencies that are more useful, let's say, to the activities of the soul, perhaps. Perhaps, I'm saying. Any comments on that? Any ideas?
According to this Schumann frequency, Tesla said, yes, this number 7.83. And then we have another measurement, which was 12. And then we can see that it reaches 20. It is a mobile frequency. It's not a fixed number. So that is something that is changing all the time. It is probably related to the sun in some way, and so the interaction. It is not something that it belongs to this, specifically to this planet. It is a resonance, but it is connected with other resonances. So probably other planets affect it at the same time. It is changing. There are systems to visualize it, to calculate it by using a spectrogram program. It's not very complex. but you need an antenna that is maybe 1,000 kilometers long. So you just find out.
Yeah, that was one of the tricks about it. It takes a very long antenna, or to try
Yeah,
to
but we have the antenna. We have the antenna. The power grid is the antenna. You can do it. Find out.
Yeah.
You have thousands of kilometers of antenna. So just connect your device and see for yourself. It's it will show distinctively a kind of fluctuation, a constant fluctuation within a range. So just look for something between 0 and 20, and you shall see it. So there is no point in saying this is the right frequency, our brain is working like this and everything is fixed. No, nothing is fixed. It's just fluctuating. So you have within the range, you have the possibilities. Because we interact, we are alive, everything is alive. So there is no point in saying it's like this. Because scientifically speaking, day after someone comes up with a new theory, and this person will say, the scientist will say, no, it's not like this, it's in another way, it's different. So we are entering plasmatic, and this is fluidity. This is what I call the wobbling effect. In fact, it is very bizarre, but it is the example. It's collapsing. Within itself in the field. It's giving energy, but at the same time it's losing currents. And in the drawing we have, we see all the circles, say the Coulomb barriers. There is a limit, another field inside and outside, inside the second one and outside the second one, inside the third one and outside the third one. Then there is the inversion, there is the wall. In some place in the center where you have the vortex, there is the inversion of the field of the energy. Probably, gravitationally speaking, it's holding the equilibrium. So it's not really collapsing, it is staying there, the object is staying there. So we have 10 different levels, fields within 3 ganses that we can put in the same disk, let's say. If we put 3 ganses in the disk, which of course they are a little part of water in them, you shall see that you have 10 different levels, friction of different kind, inside and outside. And the external ones shall be 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. Then there is 0, 4 is the inversion. And in the core, you have the opposite one. And there you can see the vortex. You can take pictures of it. It is a vortex. It's wonderful. It's just spinning and it has the shape of a tornado. And that is the opposite one, let's say, that is holding the structure. So the friction, we have 9 different kinds of friction, which have a different kind of speed according to the distance from the core. So possibly Earth is just acting in the same way, but we have maybe 2,000 different fields and concentrations and densities. So oil or gases or water, rocks, magma, energetic fields, etc., etc. So we have thousands of them.
Yes, and it all depends on one's perspective and where you want to limit it.
Yeah, this is just to understand the principle. So that's why we have to use 3 ganses within one disk, spin it, and see what's happening. This is to understand the principle. Then you can calculate, then you can create a model, and then probably you could understand Earth from this point of view. What's the wobbling effect? We have a wobbling effect on Earth, but we can see it and within the fluctuation of photons in the optical range, we can take photographs of it. So something is happening there. It's constant.
Yeah, that shows up a lot in the universe. Mashek, did you want to, were you trying to show your, did you want to show some more on your thing there?
I think we're all right now with this one. We can come back to it later.
Okay. Well, let me show something on the video briefly here about what we were just talking about.
All right.
What Jedi was just talking about. So I'll have to stop the sharing. Okay, good. I just wanted to show this device again, the Toroflux, it's known as, or it's a toroid, what would you call it? Toy, but it's a demonstration. And the idea that there's an inner and outer part to this. I mean, it's all one, this is all one piece, one solid piece of wire, essentially, flat wires joined together. The ends are joined together, and there's a certain number of coils. And there's actually one more coil when it's uncoiled compared to when it's flat. I think it's like, was it 13 here? But you open it up and there's 14, strangely enough, when you count each one around here. But what I wanted to show is there's the outer, the outer form we see here, and there's also the inner form that's up against my arm there now. And when this moves, you can see I can get it to move. And it just rolls so easily. It's like a little, in fact, it rolls so easily I can roll it down one hand, up the other one, and just back and forth like that. So it's interesting that this toroid shape it all depends on what part you're looking at. If this is the Earth and its toroidal magnetic field, for example, if you were at this part up here, you're going to have a way different reading than down in there and here or over here. It'll be varied according to the way it's moving. And the same with not just its magnetic field, with all the motions of the universe. This is the most easy motion. The way I look at it is, this is the way a light beam moves. It moves essentially around and in and back and around, just like a smoke ring. A smoke ring is the most efficient way to move through a fluid is a vortex ring, like a smoke ring. It's more efficient than the teardrop, classic teardrop shape, as I've mentioned before. And so there's an in and an out to this. There's ingoing fields and outgoing fields, depending on the direction of travel of this plasmatic entity, because plasmas end up being in toroids as well. If you look at the plasma of the proton, it probably looks like this. If you look at the plasma of the electron, it probably looks like this. If you were to look at most any plasma, it probably looks like this. And if you just compress it a little bit, it ends up being in a perfect sphere. And if you let it go, then it's more like a toroid, but it likes to have a central place for it to move on. It's hard for it to move by itself. There's no friction for it, nothing to rub against. But if it's got something like, if it's got something like this to work with, then it loves to move that way. It gathers its energy, momentum, and is totally elegant, totally smooth, totally happy, moving the faster the better, essentially.
Rick, one thing interesting about it is that you said that it moves very easily. But if you think inversely, a cylinder, if it can create a cylindrical ship, for example, can create a toroid and it can go really fast, like just like cylindrical light.
Yes, exactly.
So the inverse is also true.
So what if the ship in this case was a tiny little
stick.
thing way down in the middle of this toroid bubble moving through space as a protective environment, bubble, because it's
the toroidal bubble
something comes in, even though these are only field lines, they're rotating at such a good speed that if something comes in, it gets diverted out or disintegrated or incorporated into the fields of the unit, absorbed, all depending. But it's a protective, like when it's still, there's not much protection. Things can go zipping in. I can stick my hands in there, nothing happens. As soon as that starts spinning, you imagine if these were sort of little knife blades, plasma knife blades, virtual knife blades, you can't put your hand in there without it, not chopping off your fingers, but it just interferes. It bounces off. So it becomes very, you even look at the structure. The faster it goes, the more you can't even tell that it's a series. It looks more like a bubble than, it looks more like a solid object or a clear bubble than a series of field lines or wires or whatever you like to look at it. So interesting, and it's interesting when the thing comes slamming down to the end just goes flat because it just collapses. Everything collapses. So it's kind of like, to me, this is sort of like the RNA that can travel in a package, and then maybe it connects with something and is able to travel in a different way, and then it gets to its destination. It can wind down again, and then maybe unwind itself into another package. It's just pretty fascinating to see how it goes, how it just collapses into, you could look at it as the Ganses as well. We have the 2D SP2 type configuration, a flat two-dimensional, like as in graphene or whatever, and possibly with some forms of the Ganses nano coatings. And then we have the SP3, which is the three-dimensional aspect, where it starts to unfold into something that actually has a shape and more rigidity to it, you could say. And then we have these GAN structures that probably look something like this. And when you think of the GANs in the plasma water, that beautiful, especially when the CO2 GANs or zinc oxide is first created, and you have those wispy kind of clouds drifting through the CO2 box and the water, the salt water, and it reminds me of this, like an opened up monoatomic structure, and it's got its arms open, sort of ready to receive and ready to, but it's still its own defined shape. But if you just compress this a little, then it becomes a round, hardened kind of core. It's very stiff, hard to push in, unless you do just the right twisting, pushing movement, and everything folds right down into the SP2 flat configuration. You can imagine a series of these rings on one surface all together, and it would be still two-dimensional. You would have to look at it sideways to see just a line. You wouldn't be able to see any structure to it. Only when it unfolds into its three-dimensional possibility can we actually see it as a structure. So interesting how this little, this case from the dollar store, $2.50, buy one. I advise it. Go and just try it, play with it for a while, and just realize how cool it is that this thing exists. This idea that just a bunch of curved lines could develop into these field lines of a toroid, and how the toroid moves. And consider that idea that a smoke ring is the most efficient way to move through a fluid, whether it's water or air. You know, in water you can have a toroid, a donut of whirling water, and it's the same as a smoke ring in the air, but it's in water, and it'll move through the water. In fact, look it up, dolphins and porpoises do it. They create with their nose a ring, a vortex ring, and in fact they create it of air in the water. So there's water moving around and air, and it traps the air bubble in a ring, and they're able to control that. I can't play the video, but if you look it up, it's there somewhere. I'm sure someone has seen it before, where the dolphins will actually create these vortex rings and play with them in the water, and they'll sort of pass them back and forth because they have sustenance. They'll sustain themselves for quite a long time, a number of seconds, as they travel through the water, these rings of air as a vortex bubble. It's actually very interesting. Maybe if I can find it off the bat here. Let's see if I can find it for you. It's worth watching. Yeah, there we go. I can't play it because of various copyright issues, but I can put the link into the chat. There we go. For your viewing pleasure. And this is called Dolphins Create and Play with Air Bubble Circles. I haven't seen it, so I'm not sure what it's all about, but you can have a look at it. There's other similar videos probably on the same page there that you can also have a look at. And it's well worth it, because this is part of the natural way things move in the universe. And I think that's that we can enter into confusion if we don't realize that some of these fields, in fact all of the fields, are dynamic. They're not just static. So when we talk about stationary fields and we draw pictures of rings and that kind of thing, we have to realize that these are dynamic entities, and that there's an actual, that's the in and out flow that Mr. Keshe is always talking about. There's always an entry and an exit. And so that's, I think, important to keep in mind. And that's the way the toroid works. There's always, is there a frequency? Is there a a polarity, well, kind of, but not really. There's an entry where things are going in and things are coming out. And depends if you're looking this way going in, or if you're looking this way coming out. If you're the optimist, you would say, oh, everything is coming out and developing and creating from the central core. And if you're the pessimist from this end, you would be saying, no, everything is going from the outer and concentrating and disintegrating into the center and disappearing into the center and going toward the rear, or going toward the middle of this entity. No, it's coming from the center and going toward the outside, I tell you. No, you're wrong. It's going from the outer into the inner. So who's right? Yes, they're both right, even though they both have exactly the opposite perspectives. And I think that's the big problem we run into as humans on this planet is some people are here to experience the developing and coming out and expanding and all the creativeness of it, and others are here to experience the loss of all that and the disintegration and passing through the needle of the vortex to be recreated and transmuted and pop out the other end. So it depends on which journey you're on, which side of the coin that you're facing, basically, will tell what kind
Rick,
of experience
there's another way to look at it. You can stick your hand in or you can take your hand out. It rotates the opposite way.
Well, it's true, and also it takes two to tango in a way, because
exactly.
it likes my hand, I like it. Oh, this is a good relationship. And we could think, well, this is sort of like the physicality and the soul in a way. It takes two to tango, because without the physicality here, this soul entity is there, but it has nothing to work with. It just becomes kind of, it's not active. It can't do anything. It can't even rotate by itself. It could spin maybe a little bit this way or this way, but it can't. It doesn't have its central core. The free plasma in the center is all sort of bound up. It's a little stick compared to when it's involved with the physicality. It's got a core, it's got something to work with. It's like, all right, we got, let's dance kind of thing. It's got something to work with. So maybe the soul ends up stuck in an RNA kind of inactive state, and kind of could pass through space from many millions of years and nothing happens till it lands on Earth and finds a physicality to interact with and open up with, and all of a sudden it's got a lifetime to play with on the physicality level. The interaction of the two, though, it's not just the physicality, but it's the life of the essence or the soul that's involved with that. It's the play between the two that makes the event. One or the other is not important in itself, in a way, because they don't have the interaction till maybe the soul gets more mature and learns from the physicality, and then maybe it can have its own existence then as a separate entity and retain its dynamism, or maybe it just folds down, gets ready for the next physicality in the next lifetime, and boom, finds itself, hears a noise, something like wah, wah, finds out that it's its own mouth as it's just been born again. So I don't know. Anyway, highly recommended to get one of these spring toys. You can get them from the dollar store, or you can get the more expensive, higher quality version, Toroflux, Toroflux, I believe. Toroflux toys that are available probably on Amazon, eBay, and that kind of thing. Alrighty, what were you saying, Moshfaq? Did I cut you off about 4 times there, maybe?
No, you didn't. I said what I said, and you didn't cut me off. You actually integrated what I said to your description really well.
I see someone has their hand up here that I've been ignoring. Arno, do you want to have something to say here?
Yes, I have a question about the gadget you had on around your arm. You see, is that the plasma, and is that the magnetical, and the whole thorium that is created by the vortex, is that then gravitational, and is that then the field, or is that the plasma too?
Right. Well, that's a good. I look at it like the gravitational and magnetical is both in one.
Because
you've got the ingoing and outgoing, and so you've got the pushing apart, and you've got the coming together, the repulsive and the contractive, the expanding and the contracting, both in one here.
Mm-hmm. But sorry. Mm-hmm.
No, go ahead.
May I have maybe the right screen so that I can draw something? Maybe I can make an. Yeah, please. Thank
you. Do you want me to start that?
Please.
Okay.
Like I see. Can I draw now?
Can you see on that?
Yeah, I see him. I have now my pen. Yeah, it's working. I see it like when we have the 2 layers, and the rays are coming, and when those layers come like this, and the rays are coming like this, then herein the rays can entangle, and when it's going to feed, because it creates its own field, and again here's 2 layers, and then the new rays creates the new layer, then it grows. And I think it's going to be like this, because first it's small, like that, and it also has its radiation from the equinox, but it's not contained yet. But it also gets a position north and south, like the magnets in the teaching last time. Then this will be the capacitor, because this feeds this one, and then this is north, and then this will go like this. And then we'll want to go back to the source, as we have learned. But also here we have the new reaction. Here's the new layer from the interaction between the fields that's created from the plasma. And here we have the rays again filling where it's going to be like this again. And this is going to be filled with new rays. You understand what I mean? And here is the same. And all around. And then this is going to be a new plasma entity with another condition, because this one feeds this one, but also the universe feeds this one. And then here you have a new plasma entity, and so the planet grows, or so the soul grows.
Or so your bottle of GANs grows. Mr. Keshe talked about that last time, where each individual grain or each individual plasma of the GANs has its own field, has its own soul, you could say. But it's the combination of all of them together that creates a greater soul in the center, or a greater field strength for the whole entity. Yeah,
like a piece of the bigger soul we are creating together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, this was what I want to share. Okay.
Right, good point.
No, but then this is the thorium. No, I forget my question. Like, this is the thing you have around your arm. You see?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It's just like the ingoing and outgoing fields there, and that.
We have here one, and we have here two. You see? And then I see this as the whole plasma cluster, because it is a cluster of a bigger plasma. But it's like I've been hit by a big door, because when I see it now, we live in a true vacuum state. But so much vacuum that it's pulling something out of nothing, like matter. We live on the opposite. It's like bam, but we live all below zero, because the giver is zero, the creator, and it wanted to survive, so it started to lose energy, and the energy, like this is the same, and then it has to give back to the source, and here between layers are created, and these layers will be fed from inside and from its own in between interference, and so all started. Yeah. Okay, sorry, so I can lose myself in this. I stop now.
Thank you, Arno. It's great. That's what we want you to do, is it's no better thing to lose yourself into, because sometimes basically the soul speaks and gets into some deep things, and then suddenly we can find ourselves we kind of get lost in the middle of it and realize, whoops, where am I? But that's part of this journey, because it's not always easy to have like a conscious handle on some of these ideas. They can be very
I already saw it, Rick. I already received it, because it was already in the air, and then I came in the foundation, and now I receive the words and the way to explain. It's not very good, but I'm growing, and sometimes I see so many things that I don't know where to start it. But I see the apple sphere. That was in the new times, the late 1,000 years. In 1600, there was someone. He also found the tree of life, of the flower of life, through the apple. He saw the fields, and he held it for the tree, and the tree was like the field, like the apple showed what the field was. So he knew the plants grew after the fields. Like when you cut the tuck, the field of the whole branch is still there. And then he saw the crows, and I did not understand that then, but now I watch different. I see the leaves of the trees hanging in the water, like our kids. The dirty, oily grease, what is on the surface of the small waters between the grasslands. We call it sloughs. I don't know call it in English, but it's also creating amino acids. But I thought it was very dirty always. That was my perception. But when it rains, it falls down. And when it falls down, it hits the floor. And there's the gans. And then it starts dividing. And it's become crows. The small green plants on the surface of the water. It's instant creation. There is no seed from that. There is no flower. There is no division in a new one. That is instant creation. Like Mr. Keshe said, the fish is there because the fields are there to create fish. It's so beautiful. Yeah, now I stop because otherwise I take all the time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Arno. Okay, well, perhaps we should wrap things up for today. It's been 4 hours now, so try not let the recording go for more than 4 hours. Any other questions or comments before we wrap things up here? I take that as a no. I take that as an opportunity to wind up. Okay, well, I'm just going to check to make sure there's no last minute comments here. Looks pretty good, I think. Okay, well, it's been an interesting session. I thank everyone once again for yet another blast across the universe here in the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group. It's been a very interesting time for the last few years, and I'm going to try to write up something in the Plasma Times, an article for next month. Been asked to write about the plasma group, so I'm trying to collect some memories about that. And it has been quite a journey, I must say, in the past 5 or 6 years here, being part of this group, running this group. So I thank you all that are here now and have been in the past to help form what has been this group and continues to be, and help form myself as well, my ideas and concepts of who I am and what I can do and create and so on. And I think we're doing some good work out there. So keep up the experiments, keep on doing things, try to write up in the Plasma Scientific Journal and keep records if you can. It's becoming more and more important to Mr. Keshe and the people in the Keshe Foundation and others to collect this data and have it available in a central place so that we can keep it for useful purposes. Okay, and tune into the Knowledge Seekers Workshop on Thursday, 9:00 a.m. Central European Time on the same channel, Zoom channel at least, and the same YouTube and Facebook as well. Okie dokie. Thank you, everyone. Signing out for now. This is Rick Crammond, your host for today's workshop.
Thank you, Rick, for the platform and what we're creating.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for those words. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll end the live stream now.